Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to plunge headfirst into some really fascinating ideas and hopefully emerge with a clear understanding.
Yeah, and today it's some truly thought-provoking stuff. We're looking at excerpts from a video. It's called Anarchists Ramped Before Poker Lesson Authority is a Myth.
Right. And this isn't just, a casual chat about anarchism.
Not at all. This monologue, it's got this really impassioned, unique perspective on anti-authoritarian philosophy. It challenges, fundamentally, how we think about state authority, its psychological roots.
So our mission today is really to unpack these core themes. We want to help you understand the surprising insights and arguments he's putting forward.
Because the core idea, the really intriguing bit, is this premise that authority isn't some inherent legitimate power.
Right.
It's more like a social construct. It only exists because people believe in it.
He draws this parallel, like you might have believed in Santa Claus as a kid, something you grow out of.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dig into this.
So, yeah, that central claim comes up again and again. Authority exists only because people believe it does. It's not, some external force compelling obedience on its own.
It's a shared agreement almost,
Yeah.
internalized story.
Exactly. And that Santa Claus analogy he uses, it's pretty striking.
It really is. He's basically saying authority, police, teachers, government, it's like a story you're told when you're young and you eventually see it's not real.
Mm-hmm.
But hold on, isn't there a key difference? Like, people choose to stop believing in Santa. It's personal.
Mm-hmm.
But belief in state authority feels much more ingrained and, frankly, kind of enforced. How does he bridge that gap between just deciding not to believe and the actual real-world consequences if you defy it?
Well, that's kind of his whole point. He argues that this belief is instilled from a very young age, very much like those fairy tales. It just becomes part of your learned reality.
Okay.
And what's really interesting is his argument that once you strip away that belief, even if you still fear the consequences, the violence maybe, but once you stop buying the story,
Yeah.
the whole system built on it starts to lose its grip. The power, he argues, just sort of dissipates with the disbelief. It reveals it as mostly an illusion held up by consensus.
So if belief is really the bedrock, then logically, if enough people stop believing, the system could actually dismantle itself.
That's the implication.
And it's important to be clear here, when he talks about anarchism, he's not talking about chaos, right? That's the common image.
Definitely not chaos or lawlessness. He presents it as this deep philosophical and psychological rejection of unjustified external authority. It's about personal sovereignty, voluntary association.
So a very specific take on what anarchy means in this context is moving from theory to something deeply personal for him.
Absolutely. His own story is key. He says he was always skeptical, like he never believed in authority, even as a little kid.
Really? Even as a kid?
Yeah, he talks about challenging teachers, the principal. And there's this anecdote, quite telling, where he told his uncle, who's a doctor, that society lives in slavery. And his uncle apparently just blew up, enraged, indignant. Not curious, just defensive.
Wow. That shows how deep these beliefs run, doesn't it? How fiercely people defend them.
It does, and he extends that critique even to psychologists, mental health professionals. He sees their role in diagnosing deviance or nonconformity as basically another form of state control.
Labeling dissent as mental illness, essentially, serving the state's agenda.
That's his argument, suppressing nonconformity instead of, promoting actual well-being.
Which ties right into his bigger claim about state institutions being tools for indoctrination.
Exactly. The video flat out says schools teach obedience, not critical thinking.
And it's not just schools. Government systems, he argues, they don't primarily function through brute force. They work by first convincing people their power is legit.
Right, and then the mental health system, like we just said, becomes another tool to manage those who don't fit the mold.
This all builds up to probably the most provocative line in the whole thing.
Yeah. Which one?
You have never seen a free man. All you see are slaves.
Oof. Yeah, that's a strong statement.
It sounds really radical, right? But then he immediately grounds it. He uses this incredibly concrete example that really forces you to look at the practical side of his philosophy.
Yeah.
The IRS in the U.S.
Ah, yes. The IRS example. This is where it gets really interesting. Moving from abstract ideas to, something you deal with every year.
Totally. Makes you rethink everyday stuff.
Think about the scale. The IRS, maybe 100,000 employees, but only around 2,000 of them are actually armed agents.
Okay.
Yet they collect taxes from over 320 million citizens. How?
Well, you assume it's the threat of force, ultimately. Audits, penalties, jail.
Right, but his point is, it's not those 2,000 agents directly coercing 320 million people. It's achieved primarily by instilling this deep, ingrained belief that you must comply, that it's legitimate.
It's the collective belief doing the heavy lifting.
Exactly. It highlights the subtle power of, you could almost call it collective delusion. The vast majority's internalized consent is the real engine. It's not just believing in the authority yourself, but assuming everyone else does too. That creates the self-reinforcing loop.
And following that logic, if that core belief vanished,
Poof. The IRS, despite its bureaucracy, becomes essentially powerless. Its strength comes from our collective buy-in.
this distinction he makes is critical then between fearing violence and believing someone has the right to use it.
Absolutely crucial. He spends time on that. Believing someone will hurt you is different from believing they have a moral right to command you or hurt you if you disobey.
Like his psychopath example.
Yeah, a psychopath might use violence, but nobody thinks that gives them legitimate authority or a right to rule. Force alone doesn't grant legitimacy in our minds.
So his personal stance becomes really clear.
Right. He says, I never believed in authority. Even if I feared their violence, I never believed they had the right to do it. It's a mental line he draws. A moral stance, separate from just going along to avoid trouble.
That internal mindset is everything in his philosophy. And speaking of the internal, he talks about a dream he had.
Ah, the dream. Yeah, that's quite symbolic.
What happened in it?
He dreamt he was in a restaurant, and suddenly an anarchist comes on the radio.
On the radio, okay.
And this person is just openly talking about never paying taxes, throwing away government letters, just living their life, and facing no punishment.
Wow. That's a powerful image. It kind of makes you think about how quickly collective ideas can shift sometimes. Like, think about smartphones. Suddenly everyone had one, and it just changed everything about how we interact. If tech can do that, maybe a philosophical shift could too.
Well, for him, that dream was about hope. Hope that maybe societal beliefs are changing, even subtly. That ideas, even radical ones, can spread almost subliminally, changing minds without some big violent revolution.
But that brings up the big counter-argument, doesn't it? The one everyone throws in anarchism.
You mean if you get rid of this state?
Exactly. Won't another one just pop up? Maybe even worse. It seems like human nature, almost.
It's the standard critique, and it's understandable. But the speaker, he has a direct answer.
Which is?
That would only happen if people still believed in the legitimacy of authority, if they hadn't fundamentally changed their mindset.
So the change has to be internal first.
Precisely. And then he brings in this key concept, the non-aggression principle, the NAP.
Right, familiar to libertarians and anarchists. Explain that briefly.
Sure. It's basically the idea that initiating force or fraud against someone else or their property is always wrong. You can only use force legitimately in self-defense, never to impose your will.
Okay, so no starting fights, basically.
In simple terms, yeah. And this is crucial for his vision of a society without a coercive state. Interactions would have to be truly voluntary.
And he uses that Pepsi example, which is pretty vivid.
Yeah, the Pepsi example. He says, imagine if Pepsi decided, okay, we're setting up a private government. They hire, say, 3,000 armed guards. Would that work against a population of 320 million people who are potentially armed themselves and who fundamentally believe in voluntary association and the NTP, who don't believe Pepsi has any right to rule them?
His answer is obviously no. It would collapse because there's no underlying belief supporting it.
Exactly. Without the belief in its legitimacy, the attempt to impose this new coercive structure just fails. People wouldn't comply en masse.
So this leads to his idea of what a post-state society might look like, with the NOP as the sort of new law.
Kind of, yeah. He outlines a vision where self-defense replaces aggressive enforcement by a state.
And instead of broad top-down laws, you'd have private agreements, mutual respect.
Right. Authority wouldn't vanish entirely, but it would become localized and strictly consensual, like respecting the rules of someone's house when you're a guest.
That makes sense? You agree to their terms while you're there.
He puts it nicely. I will respect your authority in your home, just as I expect mine to be respected in mine.
So, okay, pulling this all together,
Wow.
what are the deep philosophical takeaways here?
I think the core idea is that real freedom starts in your head. It starts by rejecting what he calls the myth of authority.
And realizing that just going along, complying without questioning the legitimacy of the command, that's the real engine keeping the system going.
Yes. It's not always the threat of violence itself, but the widespread belief in the right to use that violence that holds things together. It really challenges you, to look at everyday interactions differently. Traffic stops, terms of service online. How much is built on force, and how much on our quiet acceptance of a right to control.
And that brings us back to his definition of a free man.
Right. It's not necessarily the person leading a revolution. It's the person who internally has rejected the state's claim to legitimate power. Their mind is liberated from that myth.
Okay, let's quickly recap the main points for everyone listening. First, authority works mainly because people believe in it. It's a powerful social construct.
Second, just because someone uses violence doesn't mean they have the legitimate right to. Force and legitimacy are separate things.
Third, indoctrination, especially through early education, shapes our core beliefs about power and obedience way more than we might realize.
Fourth, anarchism, in this view, isn't just politics. It's a moral stance about individual sovereignty.
Fifth, real power can be decentralized if people organize themselves around principles like non-aggression and mutual respect, reducing the need for a central authority.
And finally, sixth, rejecting authority doesn't have to mean rejecting order. It means rejecting coercion as the basis for that order.
It's definitely a perspective that pushes you to examine your own views on societal rules, on power structures you encounter every day.
And how your own consent, even passive consent, plays a role in upholding them.
So maybe a final thought for you to chew on. If authority really does hinge so much on belief, what are some of those small, everyday instances of authority that maybe we just accept without thinking? And what could actually happen if that automatic consent started to shift? What stands out to you?
Welcome. I have a poker lesson that starts in 5 minutes, so I don't have long. And I just want to make a small introduction and talk about what is on my mind and also what I will try to talk about with my poker teacher. But let's start with the first thing, my book. So it's the English version of my book. Here I have translated it into English for you. And if you scan the QR code, you get on the page immediately. The link is also in the description of the video. So this is for the French version of my fourth book. And here is for the French version. It was written in French and translated into English for you. I still have to translate it into German, but I'll never know when I find the time to do it. Now, I want to bring up the subject with my poker teacher, if he is willing to listen to me and have a small chat about authority and why I don't think that what he thinks and most people who are struggling with anarchy is actually an issue. So most people think that if you take away the government, a new government will just emerge. And they will use violence against everybody. But I do not think that that's actually possible. Because what you must understand is that I'm talking about people who do not believe in the authority of the state. And you'll tell me, but everybody does. Nowadays, everybody does. Because you have been indoctrinated. Because they taught you at school that the highest virtue, that what you have to do your entire life, is to believe in authority and that authority is legitimized, that they have the right to rule. That's what they teach you. That your teacher has the right to rule, that the policeman has the right to rule, that the taxman has the right to rule, that the guy in the army and the police has the right to rule and boss you around. They teach you that and you believe it because that's all you have ever seen. You have never seen a free man, not one single time in your entire life. Because there are no free men nowadays. All you see are slaves and dual-down slaves, NPC robots. But I never believed in authority. I never did. I didn't believe in the authority of my teachers at school. I didn't believe in the authority of the director. I didn't believe in the authority of a guy getting out of a police car. I didn't believe in the authority of soldier. I believe that they will use extreme violence, kill you because they are psychopaths, because they don't care about human life, because they have no respect for anything. But I didn't believe in their authority. And I still don't. And I didn't believe in that even when I wasn't an anarchist, even when I knew nothing about anarchy. And when I was a kid, I faced my uncle once. And I told him, this is slavery. We are slaves. And we are being treated as slaves, as cattle. And he got very upset with me. saying, I'm a doctor. How dare you talk to me like that? It has absolutely nothing to do with slavery. I was a small kid, so I was hesitating. For me, it was still slavery. But I thought there must be something wrong with me. He, the authority, the great doctor. Now he's nothing great about him. Not about him and not about any other doctor that I have seen. They prescribe you pills. Stupid pills that don't even work their entire life. He's a doctor about psychology. He knows nothing, zero, nada about psychology. And everything he teaches is worthless bullshit. The only reason why he does it is because it suits the states. Because if you are a little different than what the state expects, well, then you get into a mental hospital. And they can use, again, extreme violence. And he's so retarded that he will put you instantly in a mental hospital. For BS, that's not necessary. And don't tell me that's not the case. I know a lot of people who went in a mental hospital. 9 out of them should not even be there. I guarantee you that. I have spent time there. And my friend, Marianne, went there twice. She never took the meds. And she's all right. And I think she's much better off because she never took the meds. So it's not an absolute science. Sometimes it can help in an extreme case. But that's extremely rare. There are like 5, 10, or 100 on Earth like this. Most cases, it's totally bullshit. It's no good for the guy who teaches this, and it's no good for the guy who listens to it. Now I'm rambling and I'm going to a lot of stuff. But I want to pick my poker coach and see if he understands why authority is a joke and you should not comply to it. And everything will change when people start not believing in their authority. I never did. So how is it so hard? If I could, as a kid, figure out that you should not believe in their authority because they have none, zero. Why can't you do that nowadays that you are a grown-up man and that you are so smart and that you have all your diplomas and that you make so much money? How come you still believe in their authority? Hello, Norman. Nice to see you. Look, I would like to have a small chat with you, but not very long. I don't want to take too much time out of your day. But I had a dream, an interesting dream. I was dreaming about being in a restaurant or in a public space. And suddenly on the radio, there was an anarchist talking. And I told all my friends, you have to listen. He's an anarchist. I follow him. And it's very interesting what he says. And the guy was just talking about his relationship to taxes and that he, his entire life, never paid any taxes because every time the government sent him a letter paying his taxes, he said, great. And he took the document, put it in a box and kept on doing his life normal and never paid. And they never went through, they never put him in jail or could use extreme violence against him. But he's very marginal. So he managed to just keep on going. He had a couple of jobs, but he never kept them very long because he wasn't interested in them, like in construction or something else. So he managed to slip through the system his entire life without paying taxes. So I dreamt that he and his relationship with the tax office was on the radio. And I found that so huge. Because mentality is changing and people will wake up. That was my dream. That was what I'm dreaming about. So it's just to show you how obsessed I am with certain things. And that's why I write about them. It's actually because certain ideas obsess me. And a lot of them are very painful. But it does me a lot of good to go through them and to articulate them and put them in a word and explain it to people.
It should go on.
The subject I want to go through is the point you told me once. You told me that if we get rid of the state, then somebody will just create a new state, an entity that will do the same. And that in the end, you end up with the same we have nowadays, and it might even be worse. And I want to go through that because I don't think it's possible. I think you're correct under the current system because people still believe in authority. But I think that will be impossible the day people stop believing in that. And to me, that is like believing in the Santa Claus, that a guy goes through your chimney and brings you a present. It's something you can grow out of it. When I was a kid, I never believed in authority. I didn't believe in the authority of my teachers. I didn't even believe in the authority of my school director. I didn't believe in the authority of a policeman or a soldier. Now, I believe that they were psychopaths and they will kill you. But I didn't believe in their authority. I never did. Even when I was a kid, it was impossible for me, in my brain, to believe in their authority and think they could decide about my life, what I have to do or what I have to think. I never thought that their authority was legitimized, even as I was a kid. And once I talked with my uncle about that, and for example, I told him, well, we live in slavery, and this is slavery. We are not free men when the government can decide all that and we have to obey because it's the law. I told him we are slaves. I was young, and he got very mad with me. And he said, with all his authority, which it's also fake to me, but he said, how can you think that? It's very different than slavery. It has nothing to do with that. It's such a stupid remark, and so on. He used all his authority to tell me that I'm a retard and stupid and that I should never have thought that. But the thing is, when you stop believing in authority, they lose all the power. They're not powerful because they have an army. They're not powerful because they have the police. They're not powerful because they have tanks and bombs. That doesn't give them any power. What gives them their immense power is that people believe that they have authority and that you have to comply. And I will give you an example. There's like the IRS in the USA has 100K employees, and the rest do only administrative stuff. Now, how can 100K people and only 2,000 people who are armed extort, steal from the people through taxation a lot of the money? How can they manage to do that? It's because people, let me just finish. I'm nearly finished and I listen to everything you tell me. Please let me just finish. But how can 2K people, 2K armed people extort 320 million people? That's because people believe in the authority and they fill out the documents. And when the IRS send them a bill to pay, they instantly pay it. And they tell you, I'm an honest taxpayer. So they feel pride in paying up until the last bucks and without them having to use any violence. Now, the thing is, when people stop believing in their authority and they stop complying, they stop filling out the documents, then that entity has no more value. They cannot use any coercion, any violence anymore. Because what are you going to do against 320 million? And now, to go back to your example that I wanted to talk about, actually, I'm giving all that, but here's the point I want to come to. So let's say somebody like Pepsi wants to create a new state. And they have 100 million, and let's say they are better than the IRS, and they manage to get 3,000 people who are armed. And then they go to people and who are also armed and who have the right to self-defense and who did organize themselves for self-defense. And then they go to them and they start saying, now you have to fill out those documents and you have to pay so much and you have to go to war and you have to do this and that for us. And if you don't, my 3K people who will use extreme violence against you. I mean, Pepsi will very soon understand that that's a very bad idea against 320 million people who are armed. And even if you're not armed, you subscribe to a private police. And when you get some aggression, then you have the right to self-defense. And your bodyguard or the private police will use that right to self-defense in your favor. That will be the new law. The new law will be never intend violence, never use violence, only defend. That will be the new law. The principle of non-aggression will be the new law. In that case, they will really soon realize that their idea of making a new state and using their authority will not fly because they will never have enough weapons. They will never can use enough violence to make everybody do what they do. The only reason why a state exists is that people believe in its authority. But I never did, even when I wasn't an anarchist. Even when I knew nothing about the principle of non-aggression, I still didn't believe in the state. And nowadays, it's still impossible for me to believe in its authority. I believe that people can teach you something, like you can teach me poker. Or if you want to learn from me how to use an exoskeleton and why to use an exoskeleton, I believe that I can teach you that. If you want to listen to my philosophy, I believe that I can talk about my philosophy since I have studied it. And I really believe in it. I think I can talk about my passion to you, but I cannot use any authority. So I cannot ask you to obey to what I say. Now, I respect your authority up to a certain extent. If I go to your home and you ask me to take off my shoes, when I go to Marianne, I ask her where I can sit, what I can eat, and so on. And if she doesn't want me to talk about something, I will respect her authority. When I go to Seneca, I will follow his authority in the way he lives. I will adapt to it. If he doesn't eat meat, then I won't eat meat. I will respect him. And I do believe a lot in his wisdom. So I will try my best to follow his advice. But even Seneca, I do not think he has the right to use violence against me if I do not agree with what he says or he does. So my idea is simply that the only thing that has to change in people's mind, and I'm not the one who came up with that, is the belief in authority. If you stop believing in authority, then all the weapons are useless. All the bombs are useless, and all the tanks are useless. There's nothing you can do with them as soon as people stop believing in their authority. And that's not the case nowadays. But I think that people can wake up, and when they wake up, the system will disintegrate from itself. You break free from the matrix and it doesn't exist anymore. So I hope you didn't mind me rambling about that. And I'm very interested in having your thoughts on that subject. I know you are always critical, and that's why it's interesting to talk with you. So I really want to hear everything you can say and think to prove me wrong, because I think that that's interesting. If you don't just say it's all great, but you make my life a little hard and make me think about stuff.
Yes, I think what you say is accurate, and I do think state would disappear if people stop obeying it or believing in. One thing I think about is state is, even though it poses limitations, regulations, laws, taxes on their population, I think a very big aspect of a state is actually to protect from the outwards. So I think the big purpose of a state is not that if a group of people live together and they're similarly minded and they're with people, for example, do you hear me?
I do. Sorry for making a strange thing. I'm listening. It's just my camera went on one side. It should be in the middle. So I don't understand why the technology... Now it puts me in the middle, you see? That's strange. But keep on. It was interesting what you said. So you were talking about protecting from the outside. And I'm not sure I really get what you want to talk to me. Because I'm not thinking you want to talk about an army invading. Or is that the case?
Well, for example, yes. For example, something like that. I don't think if a group of similarly minded people live together, that they need something like a police or any of the government things.
But can I just interrupt a second? I don't think that the police will stop. I think that the police will exist. So I think you will pay, like healthcare, you will pay an amount every year. I don't think that amount will be very high. I think it will be very low, like $50 or $100 a year. That's already a lot if you pay that. And in exchange, you have a number you can call. And when people don't respect the principle of non-aggression and harm you physically or your family members, or do you harm with your wealth, they steal your boat or I don't know what, you can call them. And then they will use your right to self-defense and your right to get an indemnity. And if necessary, they will use lethal force, but only in a case of self-defense when you are harmed. If not, they cannot do anything. There's no law, there are no endless books and endless articles that you have to follow. It's just if something really bad happens, if somebody steals your car. And I also think that the free market will make it very hard for people to steal anything. But I don't think that the police disappears. All the services you have nowadays will exist. I just think that they will be much better, much cheaper. Even poker, playing poker will be cheaper. Because why is it not so expensive? Because they also have to do a lot of compliance. And it's not easy to have a casino. And they get extorted. So they have to pay the state a lot of money. And all that will disappear. So the rate we pay as poker players will drop. And it will be much easier to be profitable. That's my idea. But on everything, I think you have the same services, just much better. And I think that good products will exist. My exoskeleton break down in 2 months. Now, when they have to really compete and have to have loyal customer, they will stop doing stuff that is obsolete, that breaks down in a very short period of time, so you buy a new one. I think that will also cease. So I just think that life will improve a lot once there's no more artificial barriers that keep people from doing the right thing. Sorry for interrupting you, but I won't talk anymore. But it's just if you tell me that what we enjoy nowadays won't exist anymore, that's not what I'm talking about. That would be madness. I'm not talking about going back to caveman mentality or Mad Max.
Well, yes, but you would have a lot of different numbers then. You'd need a number for police, and then it would be a private company, and private companies are way less stable. They can go out of business, they can retire, all these things can happen, and it would be, I think, more unstable. Then you'd have to figure out a private school, private roads. That's a big part of transport systems. You would have to have meetings with your members from your city or village, and each one has to agree to give some money to build a new road. But maybe some people would disagree. And then how would you build the road? It would be quite messy and complicated, I think. And even internally, if there's not like some structure, I mean, some of it would work, but then what if there's only one good police force, for example, while other ones go out of business because one is so good. And now that one decides that they make 10 times the prices. What could you do about it if there's, I mean, maybe I'm worrying too much about this. That's just the internal stuff. I think the external thing is much greater, that if your country does not have a state, and there are countries like that, I think some African countries don't have a stable government, and life still happens. People do contracts and things that you describe. You would be very, how to say, very unprotected against an organized state trying to take over your country or attack it. If your country is just like not so organized, and then there's a country with a huge military then it would be very difficult to, what would you do then about it if you don't have a great defense, military, and I mean, all these things are very costly. But I think the reason why it is like this, what you said as well, is because most people want it this way, and because they're worried if it stops. And I think it's reasonable to be worried about it. If state works with a lot of problems, and if there wasn't a state, then it was all just different people dealing with these things. Then if everyone in the world would be like that, then there wouldn't be an external enemy, right? And there wouldn't be any issues or worry. But even if every European nation decided that we're going to abolish the state, then there could be a bordering nation somewhere that does not do that. And then it could pose danger internally for it. I'm somehow thinking of biology here, where every cell has this border around it, and within a cell, it's often quite fluid in biology. There's liquid there, things moving around. Now, there's still some structure within a cell, all these crucial parts of it, but the border around it is quite strong and rigid there. And the point of it is to keep the internal cell intact, because if there wasn't the border, then the cell would just dissolve with the extremities and would be very vulnerable as well. I wouldn't be anything holding it together then. I mean, even if you would be right, we could be saying that it would actually, some of these fears wouldn't be so big, and actually it would be more cost effective, and there is a lot of bureaucracy with states and all this. It could be that it would be better, but it's still not even close to possible unless the majority of people would support a system like that. So you would have to convince most people for this to be a good idea. And I think most people cannot be convinced unless there's like a good example that's thriving. And so the example would be, I think the only way this could ever become a reality is if there would be a community somewhere or a nation that would try it out. And then if it's true that it's a better way of doing things, then just by the market competition, that nation would become extremely successful. And then everyone would want to be stateless. But why isn't there any examples of that? Why isn't that countries which have no ruling power, or like Somalia or something like that, why are they unable to? So how I see it is, what happens in a country when the government falls is there just immediately will be a lot of small fractions. I think that's true in Somalia. There's just a bunch of warlords who are, it's like gangs basically, who are, I'm the boss of my region, you're the boss of your region. Then in a way, what happens, even if they're not official states, they're kind of like mini states. And then they will all argue and fight with each other. And there's even more chaos and problems. So I think what's necessary is an example. And if that is the best system, then you don't need any convincing. So, well, same if I think about poker coaching, for example, ideally, it should be that once you learn something new and implement it over time, then you would see that it's working, that it's going well, and it's beneficial. And then there isn't anything to discuss or argue about. It's kind of what's working, what's not working. So I don't think you can just by propaganda or just change every people's opinion on if a state is a good thing or not. I think that would be very difficult. I think what would be easier is just to find the people who already agree with this and then create like a settlement, I guess, somewhere to try out if it's possible to self-organize in this way. And if it works very successfully, then more people would want to join it and it would gather interest through that. But it's not so easy even to do because most of the land is owned by a state already. So it's very difficult to even find a remote place to try something different like that. But that's where I'm looking at history. In history, there was many remote places all around the world and people settled everywhere and lived all sorts of different ways, but they still ended up with states. If it would have been better, it's not like they always had a state to begin with, but why did it happen this way? I'm thinking of Genghis Khan, who was one of the greatest emperors or warlords who conquered a big part of the Asia and even some Eastern Europe, I think, and how Genghis Khan, I think at the time, a lot of people just lived in a small village, small settlement, but he was able to create a big state of big structure hierarchy. And it was very easy for him to just control and take control of all these places because there was no organized thing to stop him. So he could just get his big army on horses and they were going through the whole Asia and Mongolia and all these regions. And then there was a city or village. And then they just went there and slaughtered everyone because there wasn't like a pushback or force against it. So, I mean, for me, defense is, I know Switzerland is famous for having the best defense in the world. It's such a long-standing country, all these world wars and things, and Switzerland has kept intact for this time. But if I think of my people in my country, we've all throughout history been under the control of Swedes, Russians, Poles, Germans, all these different bigger nations with better organization just have invaded land, and then our people have lived kind of like subordinates or slaves under the control of another nation. So I think nowadays in my country, a lot of people are they don't like all the things the state tries to do or control internally, or the taxes, and no one ever likes taxes. But people here really, I think most people do like that there's a lot of more military spending and effort put to create a strong border and to have in some way more control to the state. But the thing is, it would be our state. So I guess that's how I would summarize this. No one likes a state, really. No one likes this thing that can control all these things and take a lot of resources. But at least if it's your state for your people, your nation, it's still a little bit better than to be without a state and then most likely fall under another state. Like a bigger state would be, oh, that's free territory. There's no state there. Let's go there and make it part of our state and extort them for all their resources, and then all the people will be our slaves and things like that. So I don't see a way. I would like to live here in Estonia without a state, but I think it wouldn't be realistic, because for that to happen, all the neighboring countries would also need to not have a state. Unless that's the case, that they do have a state. They do have a lot of military expenditure and big armies and so on. Until that's the case, I feel like the state is the only way to have any way to exist in the world as it is. So that's what I think of this.
So you gave me a lot of objections and on some detailed points, but I want to just talk about two of them. One is the transition you talk about, and the other one is your remark, which is interesting, that if it's such a great idea, why don't we see it anywhere on Earth? That's not your words, but you said everywhere people did go through electing a king and a leader and building a state. So since that was always the case, and we never see anywhere any anarchy, well, that maybe it's impossible because it never happened anywhere. And so for that objection, the thing is, people believe a lot of nonsense. They always did. And I believe that the human consciousness can evolve and that we can go out of it, that we can become more mature and stop looking at it in the way we did until now. There was a time where the Incas believed that you have to sacrifice people for their god, to cut the head off and let it roll down a pyramid. They thought that that was absolutely necessary, and nobody objected to that. Before that, there was a time where the slave believed that their slave master owned them, and if they would flee, if they would try to escape, then they would steal the property of the slave master, and it would be an unacceptable thing to do. The only thing they can do is, with the couple of bucks that they get, try to starve themselves nearly to death, spend less money on food, and get enough money so that one day they give the slave master enough money so they set them free, or do something for them so important that the slave master in exchange grants them their freedom. But they really believe that it would be a very bad idea to steal from the slave master and run away. So people believed in a lot of crap and a lot of nonsense. And I think we can evolve and become more mature human beings. Now, you talked about war and people invading you. And the thing is, you must understand why they do it. They do it because people believe in the authority of the state. And once you annex some territory and then you send them some legal documents, they will comply with those legal documents. If it's military service or taxation or anything else, they will comply because they think you have some authority as soon as you are the ruler. And that is why those states try to get new territory. But massacres can happen, yeah, as long as people still believe in the authority of the state. But I never did. If the state asked me to drop the nuclear bomb on somebody, I would never do it. If the state tells me to go fight in trenches, I would never do it. And I didn't. And what happens when you don't? In my state, the draft is mandatory. So they wanted to make a soldier out of me. I just didn't comply. And when you don't comply, you make it very hard because you just stop the entire system. And they don't like that if you stop the entire system. So they say, oh, you don't do the military service, and they send you off. Because it stops. They tell me to run after a ball. I do not run after the fucking ball. They tell me to do any kind of crap, to jump, to sit, to fill out a document, draw hearts on it, trees, make crosses. I try to answer every single question wrong. And when you do that, they realize you won't comply. And then they tell me, but you must understand, we don't have the money, so you have to do the work for free. But I know that's all crap. It's the wealthiest state on earth. And you fucking retard want to tell me that we don't have the money to pay for professional soldiers? It's just, that is easy. You tell them that they have to do it, and the people do it. You tell them jump, and they ask how high. But I don't. And if you don't, you make a joke out of it. You try to do something funny instead of doing what they do. You're an obstacle. They really don't like you to have you, actually. And they do everything you can so you don't become a soldier. And yes, they could put me in prison, maybe on a small period of time. But then what? Put me in prison for my entire life? just because I didn't want to run after a ball or do some stupid thing that I didn't agree to from a moral point of view. So let go. Now, not every state is as, I want to say humane, but as kind to his citizen as we are. And let's talk about a state like Ukraine. So there's a video going around, and it's a soldier who is in the streets, and he's looking for people. And he sees a man on a bicycle. And when the guy comes, he pushes him very strong, like with two hands like this. And the guy falls on the ground. And then a car comes, and he tells him, now go into the car. It's their recruitment. So they just throw him on the ground. Then a car comes, 4 soldiers come out. They open the back door and say, enter the van, and that's your recruitment. And now you have to do your military service. But again, if that guy doesn't comply, it would be worthless for the Ukraine to do that. And if you look at Russia, so Russia also drafts people. And they have to draft more people. And it's very hard to get enough people because a lot of people die on the battlefield very fast. For example, so the draft people, didn't go through a lot of training. And then they send them on the battlefield, and on the Ukrainian battlefield. And there are like 800 new recruits who come, and they use a school and a gym of a school as a building to shelter them. And one of the guys, after the meal in the evening, takes his phone. And he calls his mom, and he tells his mom, I'm all right, everything's fine, and so on. And the Secret Service, American Secret Service, realized that he's a soldier, one of the new recruits, and they can pinpoint him, his GPS, they can pinpoint him, and they give the information to the Ukrainian state, and the Ukrainian state sends a missile, and 800 new recruits, very young, 18, 25 years old, they all die. Because a missile hits the building and they are all dead. And then Russia has to find 800 new recruits and play the same game again and hope that this time something doesn't go wrong and they don't all die. But they only can do it as long as people comply, as long as people believe in the authority of the state. And I never did. So how is it possible, even I didn't know anything about the non-aggression principle and nothing about, I didn't even know the word. I still didn't believe in the authority. So if I can figure that out on myself without anybody teaching me and anybody explaining me anything, I think a lot of people can. And if you stop complying, then they can't do nothing. And if you have a lot of people, now you are their master because your army did invade them, like you, the Estonians. Let's say I invade the Estonians, but they are all anarchists. Nobody believes in my authority. I can send them documents, they will just put it in the bin. And whatever I say, they don't do it. What good would I have to be at the head of Estonia if they are all anarchists and nobody believes in my authority and nobody does anything? Now, if I try any of my friends to use any authority and say you have to do that in the market or you have to do that in life or you should be like this with your kids or choose that wife, or if I try to tell them anything, they all laugh. Even my best friends, they laugh and they would never do it because they don't see my authority. And even if I use a weapon, a knife or a gun, they would never do what I say because they don't believe at the beginning in my authority. So they won't obey. It doesn't matter what I do. So I think it's exactly the same. If people go up and realize that the people who are bullying you around, the people who are telling you what you have to do all day long, who are bossing you around, if they realize that the people who are bossing you around have no authority, they don't own you. You're not the property of the state. They don't own you. You're a free human being. You can do whatever you want. When people realize that they have no authority to boss you around and they stop doing what they tell you to do, then it crumbles. It disappears. So it's the point I made at the beginning that it only sustains itself because they think it is legitimated. Kim Jong-un could never send his troops to Russia if the North Korean didn't believe in his authority and didn't believe they have to be the people on earth who have the longest military service and they have to serve the state even if the state is so poor that they can't even give them a ration so they don't starve to death. There are soldiers in North Korea who starve to death, very bad, malnourished, but they still believe that they have to comply with the state because if they do not, it use extreme violence. But the main basic thing is that they still believe in the authority. But I think that can change. Nobody nowadays believes that he's a slave of a free man. and that three men can tell him what to do, tell him where to sleep, tell him if he can have kids or not, and everything. Nobody believes that nowadays. They all realize that slavery, as it exists in antiquity, is bad. And there's a lot of things in the Bibles, which is supposed to be divine law, that nobody believes in. No Christian believes in anymore. And no Christian would like to do that because they realize that it was extreme evil. So people can mature and grow out of it. And when people stop believing in the authority of the state, then the state crumbles. And as I told you, if historians are anarchists, there's no point in being their leader. What do you say to that?
I don't think it's a matter of belief only, because in many times and many countries, even nowadays, no one asks you. It just shows how nice country you live in, and that they will maybe cause you some problems and things like that. But if you don't comply, then it's actually no big problem. And I think you could be shot in many countries. You just go there, join the military, and you're like throwing your trees and saying no, and then they're like, and then it's over. And so I think of my childhood, and my father was very authoritarian. So I didn't feel as at that time that I had any choice in any matters where he said me to do something or do it like, hey dad, maybe I don't want to do it. Or I didn't have this option because he would hit me, or he would pose some immediate punishment for it that I did not want. So either I'd have to go to my room. If I would not obey with that, then doors there, go outside and don't come back. So it wasn't like I had an option. I mean, I wouldn't have gotten food. I wouldn't have gotten to live there. I would have had to go to live with my relatives, or not a homeless shelter, but where the kids go, that place when orphanage. And if I went there, they would also have had their rules. So if the orphanage tells me to do something and I don't want to do it, it would have been the same. I would have to do what they say, or they would have put me to youth prison. And then if I don't say what they do in youth prison, then probably they would also beat me, put me in solitary confinement. And in Russian times, they put you in gulag, which is you would be forced to do it was kind of like where the Jews went with in Germany, like a work camp. In Russia, if anything about you was weird in the Soviet times, if you play funny, for example, they would just say you're insane. If you draw some things to that piece of paper they give you, this person's insane, you would go to the work camp, and then you would do some heavy labor there. Or if you don't do it, then you would be killed at some point. I mean, I think in Nazi Germany, there was even less of people arguing about these things. You would just be shot. So I see it as a liberty to serve a country or nation where you could say no, where you could argue, where you could have freedoms. But because if you don't support the country like that, the next moment, the country might be something else that's way worse. So I do think that is the authority there. I mean, even if you say that IRS just has 2,000 weapons, well, those 2,000 weapons are enough to kill a lot of people. And that's it is real in a way, just like it's not like my father was using constantly violence against me. It's not about that. That wouldn't be effective. If you just beat someone, that you would destroy them and you couldn't have authority over them. But that threat of violence, that's something that maintains the authority. And if you oppose it, the only way you oppose it is you have to be strong enough to not be threatened by that violence, which is impossible, really. I mean, well, unless you have some capability and violence yourself. I mean, the poker table is the same way in a way. If you don't have that threat that you could go all in or put some pressure on the other player, then they won't feel that even a player who's tough to play against in poker, you always feel that pressure that they could make it very difficult all of a sudden. So, I mean, I feel like to me, it's not a matter of belief. I think a lot of people obey for just because they want to live. They don't want to go to prison. They don't want to go to like a place like that. And I think you could say something like, well, there wouldn't be any prisons if everybody thought the way you do think. The thing is, you're very exceptional in the way you think. So there's almost nobody who is as anarchistic thinking as you. I think that's less than 1%. Even 80% of people could agree with you. Even 90%. Even 90% of people could be similar minded then. But it just takes 10% of people to not think like that, get organized, and say that if you don't obey what we say, we will shoot every one of you. And most of those 90% would now comply because otherwise they would be dead. So, I mean, what I'd like to hear from you is, well, what would be the way to change it then? There has to be like, what would be like the next step, or how long would it take? That's another one. If the next step is just people have to start as thinking smarter and thinking differently for it to happen. Is it 10 years? Is it 100 years? Is it 1,000 years until the general people's consciousness evolves enough for them to not comply? I mean, it could be a long way around. I don't see how in 1 year it could be any different, or even in 10, or even in 50 or 100 years. I can't really imagine this changing in our lifetime, or if it would change, then what would cause it? What would be the thing that the militaries would put down their guns and the states would say that that's all? I mean, if with the taxes, for example, if everybody just decided tomorrow we're not gonna pay any taxes, well, then the gunmen would start to come door by door and make examples of some people. And then soon enough, most people would be, well, they can't shoot all of us, but they can shoot many of us, and it could be me. So I don't want to risk it. I'm going to pay my taxes. It's easier to do that than worry about that maybe tomorrow they come and shoot me because I didn't pay my taxes. And I think it's very real. I mean, there's prisons in every state in the world, as far as I know. There's militaries, police force who are armed forces who have tools in their disposal that they can take a human life very easily with. So I don't see it's just a matter of opinion. I mean, if you live in like a Western society, you could feel like no one's really gonna do too much and no one's actually gonna do it. But that's only because the state runs so effectively and people comply. If they don't comply, then they would still force those laws, but just do it way more strictly. So I don't think not complying makes it better. I think it would just make it way more violent. They would still impose their authority. So just to finish on my personal anecdote, if my father told me to go outside and like paint a fence, for example, I could say no and feel like I gained some liberty. I don't have to go paint the fence today. But I was smart enough to not do it because I knew he's going to ask me nicely one time. Maybe he's going to ask me with an angry voice the second time. Third time, he's not going to ask me. He's just going to do something that I find very unpleasant. He's going to either hit me, he's either gonna like physically pick me up and just like take me outside of the fence and say, if you don't wanna paint this fence, you're not allowed to live here anymore. And goodbye to you, good luck to you. And it's as simple as that. So it's way easier to comply. And there's also a good side to it. What I mean is the good side is through all this compliance, we have these nice countries that run quite smoothly, I feel like. But if there was always a conflict and like this stateless situation where there's constant arguments which turn into wars or conflicts, then nothing would get done. If people are fighting, they're not building new roads or building new stuff. They're just destroying what's already there. It's like if a man and a woman start arguing, then dishes start flowing like dying, and then there's a broken plate or whatever, TV gets broken. Sometimes you should argue when there's like an important point, and if you can change someone's mind, that's a good way. But it's not so easy to change someone's mind in the case of the government who have the power. The only way you change the mind is you'd have to make it so that it's better for them. So you can't go to the king and make the case for the king that it would be better for you if we didn't have a kingdom and you didn't have this castle and all these servants. The king would laugh at that most likely. And most people are very greedy. They want more power. They want more authority. So they're happy to be in that position. They're happy to be the policeman, the soldier, and the power that gives them. So I don't think you have a way to change their mind for it. And so if you don't comply to their rules, then they will just be more authoritative in making those rules. So, for example, in some way, I feel like we wouldn't need the IRS if all the people voluntarily paid their taxes. We wouldn't need those workers who are trying to find out people who are cheating the system and all that. We wouldn't need the police if there wasn't any violence. Actually, we have this in Estonia, that our prisons are so empty. We're now thinking of with one of our prisons to port prisoners from another country, and then the other country will pay us for taking care of those prisoners because people aren't criminally minded here. I feel like the way to a smaller state is also if there's no crime, at some point people will be like, or the government will decide that we don't need as many police forcemen. We can have a smaller police force. But usually, like in Soviet times, there was huge effort going into KGB, the intelligence of the governmental agencies. I think the same is in US. There's so many IRS and all these FBI, CIAs and all of that stuff just needed because people are not complying. I feel like the less compliance, the more, which you could say is a true slave mindset, that if the slave master doesn't even have to force their way to a slave, they can just say, hey, you Norman, go paint that fence and I will go and do it like a slave. And they don't have to pose any threats even or nothing with that. But it's up to a point. I mean, if as a slave, people start saying, I don't want to do it, then next day they won't ask as nice. And I don't think the asking would stop. I think it would just become way more violent. So in North Korea, if they say you go fight in Korea, or you go fight in Ukraine, I mean, I don't think people there, it's not like they feel like they have a choice there. So I think it's a good thing you felt like you had a choice or you could. If I think of school, I was a very bad student. I was arguing with my teachers and all these things. And what changed was when I went to school, it was that time where they stopped physical punishment in schools. So they took away some authority from a teacher. And well, that meant that there could be a bad student in a classroom like me who was making jokes, interrupting the teacher and things like that. Had the teacher had more authority, I wouldn't have been a problem like I was in a classroom there. So, I mean, and I think of, again, a classroom, what happened if the authority left the room, if the teacher went outside the classroom? Usually, most of the kids stopped working. They just started talking to each other. Sometimes they started jumping on the tables or doing like all this crazy stuff. It was a chaos. And then teacher came back and okay, everyone was acting more or less properly again.
Norman, I think it's a mind virus. Once you realize that they have no authority, because for me it's easy. I only see authority in moral values and Stoic principles, because I think they are correct, they are good, and following them does me a lot of good, and it's the best thing for the rest of humanity. So I only believe in that authority, and that authority only tells me to be the best version of myself every day and to strive to that. But I do not believe in any other authority, not medical authority or any else. I will go to them, and sometimes they save your life, but it's a very rare case. Now, the mind bias I'm talking about, that can easily happen. I talk a lot about anarchy, and a lot of people talk about anarchy, and people can listen to them, and they can get infected with that mind virus and strive for real freedom. And what you oppose to me is extreme violence. You say the price you will have to pay is imprisonment or death if you do that. And yes, you are right. In states like North Korea, that will be immediately the case. For not even for such a huge thing like going to not doing your military service, but for a lot of other stuff also. There will
sector. But there was another point with that, which was if our people would not comply, then I posed that our states would all be more like North Korea, that the violence would immediately start to increase. So if people stopped being orderly citizens, then the violence would increase.
That's an interesting point. Normally I have straight answer, but I don't want to say something that is not correct. So I would like to be able to think about that a little before giving an answer. The first thing that comes to mind is that it wouldn't matter. As long as you're infected with the virus, as long as you want true freedom and you do not believe in authority, then it doesn't matter if they use extreme violence. It will too much work. It will cost them too much and it will be too bad for the PR relation.
No, because, so to quickly this, when do I have more freedom? When I go paint the fence that my father tells me, or if I don't do it, and now he says, takes away all my liberties. First thing, he would take away my phone, my computer. Then if I still wouldn't comply, then he would kick me out. In terms of a state, if you were in prison or you're outside of the prison but have to follow laws and pay the taxes, where would you be more of a slave? You could say mentally you're a more free man in the prison because you're not complying to what they're saying. But the way you live, you would be more free as a slave. Or if you live in a Jones plantation and you do what the slave master does, when are you more free? If you do what the slave master does, or if you try to oppose him and then he chains you up and starts beating you and puts you through this punishment process, where would you be more free? In one way, I mean, it's not absolute freedom to do what someone tells you, but I feel more free that way than when I would be in a prison. As a slave, you could be granted some freedoms, and those freedoms could be taken away from you. So if you don't follow the slave master, then you are a slave at that moment. That is true what you're saying. You are in slavery. But if you don't follow that, you could be even in a greater slavery where you lose your freedoms. You get put into a work camp, for example. And even there, if even that's not enough and you decide to not follow the prison rules, then at some point they could just decide that it's easier if you don't exist in the society and just kill you. And you're right, there isn't enough space to put all the people in the prison, or if they killed everyone, that seems also quite excessive. So I think what they're saying is if enough people are opposing it, then they wouldn't have enough prisons to put everybody there. And I agree with that. But the thing is, they don't have to put everybody there. I think back to the classroom. If classroom, like people are disorderly there, the teacher usually just has to punish one person, make an example of them. And now the second person would be second to punish will think, if I don't start behaving now, I will get the punishment the first person. And now he will start acting nicely and following the rules. Now the third person will think, well, second person is now orderly. If I'm not orderly, then I will be the next who will punish. So sometimes it just takes punishing one person, and the other 1,000 people will all be like, well, if I'm not acting as I should, then I would be next. I would be made an example. And if everyone, let's say the whole group decides that we're all gonna just not follow the rules and they will know who to be punishing next, well, then if it's a really strict state, then they will just take it randomly. They will just start shooting people until the order is maintained. That's a straight up war. I mean, that's what happens in war. We're just gonna keep killing people from the other side as long as it takes for them to stop behaving the way we don't want them to behave. So in the Ukraine-Russian conflict, the Russians will just keep on killing Ukrainians as long as the Ukrainians start doing what the Russian government wants them to do. And the Ukrainians are thinking the same way about the Russians, that we're going to kill you as long as you stop invading our country and do what we want you to. And that can go on as long as one side decides that enough is enough and we're better off not all killing and dying. You don't have to punish everyone. It just takes to punish one person, and then the next people will think that I don't want to get that punishment.
I think I get it. That doesn't mean I agree, but I really find it interesting the point you come up with. So what I want to do is circle back to your dad and talk about the imbalance of power. And I believe you thought as a kid that he was more powerful than he actually is.
No, he was, because he went to work and I was just a child. So he had all the power. And he was also physically 2 times larger than me. So
I know that. And that's why I talk about the imbalance of power. How old were you at that time?
I mean, all throughout my childhood, basically.
Yeah, but the moment you talked about the fence you had to paint. How old were you? Were you closer to 18 or were you closer to 14 or closer to 8 years old? I just have to put an age on that moment because I have to stop it in time and talk about it.
But it was like this all the way until I moved out of home.
I perfectly get it, but I want to zoom in and look at that specific moment.
So let's say I was 10 years old.
Okay, 10 years old. So you explained to me, and that's a way of educating. I would be actually very strict as a parent, but I wouldn't use any violence, never. I only would argue. I only would use what we call syllogism in French. I only would use that.
Wouldn't listen to it.
Okay, that's good, Norman. That's good.
I was a bad child.
That's
if
good.
my father just tried to argue, I wouldn't care then.
I understand that. But here's what I want to say. So you don't do the fence because you think it's immoral and you should not do it. And then, but it doesn't matter. You might be wrong with your judgment, but you don't want to do it because you don't want to be a slave and you don't want to do it. And now the sanctions come. First, he picks you up, then he takes your phone, then he takes your laptop, and at the end, he kicks you out of the house. And you are 10 years old, you told me. Do you really think he would go through with that, with all that, when you're 10 years old? I might be wrong. I've never met your dad. But do you really think he would go through with that? You're 10 years old. So you end up on the streets. Do you really think that he would go through with that?
What you're saying is if you find that the authority is just making threats and doesn't actually follow through with those threats. So you realize it's fake authority.
I'm not saying it's fake authority. I'm saying you believe too much in his power. You believe too much in his absolute power and that he can put you on the street and let you starve to death. I think you were too young to realize that his power has limits and that he cannot do whatever he wants.
So you're right. He would probably have some issues with that. It's not so easy to just abandon your child. I agree with that. But he could have very many sanctions that he could very easily impose on me. For example, let's say I have a trip I want to go to, like a family holiday. He could decide to not take me there. I would want to go there. He could take away my laptop. There's no rule that your child must have a laptop or a phone. He could take those things away. He could also pose all sorts of other stuff, like I'm not allowed to watch TV or go out and play, or he could make my life very miserable. So then I would be like Harry Potter. If you ever seen the movie or read it, where he's living in this small cage under the stairs, and then the other kids get to have like good parties and so on, but Harry Potter doesn't get any presents, any of that good stuff. So he could make all these things that I like in life that he's giving me because he has the resources to do it. He could take all of that away. So would I like that for the cost of my freedom? And that's like a philosophical moral question. And at that time, usually I was thinking these things are important to have access to internet, to have that if I want to go to a birthday party that my father grants me that ability to do and so on. And it was easier or just a better way to decide to do something I didn't want to do and be a slave to paint that fence so that I would get all those things not taken away that I want. Now, if he asked me too much and the benefits weren't good enough, then maybe at some point I would decide that I'm not going to do what he asks of me. So if the taxes are too much, if the labor is too much, then maybe yes, it would be better that to not do it. But if we look at the labor camps, for example, which is extremely authoritative, it's just to take away someone's food there. And that's all it takes. It's all it takes. It's like you don't have to even do anything else. You just take away the slave's food and they would be happy to be a slave for all the day, to be able to not be in hunger. So yes, if my dad was super bad, then at some point I would have said, what's the point? And it's better off to live in an orphanage or go live with relatives. But he wasn't so bad. There was enough good stuff there that he granted me that I was willingly making those sacrifices of doing these things I wouldn't want to do so that I wouldn't lose the things I had. So yes, I was going to too much extreme, right? With what you said that he would kick me out completely and so on, but he could make my life way less enjoyable than it was. So pretty much that's what I think.
But we agree, as you just stated, that he wouldn't use the worst sentence against you, that he would stop before that.
But not every state is like...
that he would stop before that. And in a lot of cases, they would actually stop before using the worst sentence against you. Because it's bad PR and it just takes too much effort to do that. Now, as there are unfortunately places where things are so bad, like North Korea, where they will use the worst sentence against you. And that for really trivial stuff. So they put you in front of a firing squad and you get executed and everybody has to watch. Your family members are in front and then the rest of the crowd, everybody has to watch your public execution. That's true, but that's an extreme case. And in most countries, I don't think it's that bad. In most countries, I don't think it's that bad. So you won't have the worst sanction. Now, I want to talk as a Stoic man. And the image of Caton comes to mind. He was a general before Seneca. And Seneca admired him a lot because he wanted to defend the Republic against Pompey and Caesar. And he wanted to beat them both. So he went to war against the most powerful citizens, both of them. And he wanted to beat them because he wanted to maintain the Republic alive. And he thought the freedom would be killed by both of them. But he also thought that Pompey was less bad than Caesar, because Caesar wanted to conquer the entire world, and he thought that was even worse. So he didn't like that at all. But he lost on the battlefield. He lost against the armies he was opposing. And then came his final moments. And he said to himself, until now, I was not fighting for my freedom, because I knew that I was a free man. I was fighting for the freedom of everybody else. But now that the freedom of humanity and the salvation of the world is over, now that I cannot hope for any good outcome anymore, now that the game is played, I will make sure that I stay free. And he put an end to his life. He opened his belly. Unfortunately, a doctor came and he survived. So he woke up in a hospital bed and he realized that he had failed once more. That he had failed first by trying to beat Caesar and Pompey on the battlefield, and now that he had even failed in his attempt to killing himself. So he just did it a second time, and this time it worked, and he died as a free man. What I want to tell you is, if you give me the choice between being a North Korean citizen, believing in Kim Jong-un as a god, and dying for him on the battlefield in Ukraine, or being executed in front of a firing squad, I would choose instantly to be executed. And not just for that, for everything else. I don't mind. He can execute me because I watched a DVD. He can execute me for whatever he wants. I'm the most happy person on earth if I get executed as fast as possible. And I don't have to listen to the North Korean state one more second in my life. I would pay that price to die as a free man. Now, I'm a Stoic man, and I studied a lot of philosophy. And I've realized that it doesn't matter how long you live, because the end will be the same. But what really matters is how you live and what you do to your entire life. A life that I consider worthless and that I don't want to live, I will give it up, so I don't mind dying. And I know that that's a very hard thing, but you must understand that you are posing me the worst situation possible. And in most cases, it won't be the worst situation possible, because in most cases, they don't go that far. And also, it's the worst situation possible because you are the only anarchist and nobody else thinks or believes like you. Everybody else believes in the authority of the state. If North Korea would tell me, kill that guy because we found a Bible there, now be the soldier who shoots him dead, that woman, because she had a Bible in her home, do you really think I would take a weapon and kill an innocent woman just because she had a book in her home that the government doesn't want you to have? Of course I would not. But that's me, because I have some moral principles and because I had the luxury of studying a lot of philosophy. I know that that's not the case for everybody. But still, it's the worst outcome. And when you talk about the worst outcome, I will argue that it's better being dead than alive, because it's the worst outcome. And I don't think we have to accept the worst outcome just to see the light of day anymore. My life is not so pleasurable. If I die now, just after this lesson or during this lesson, it is not a bad thing that happened. I'm actually in a better position as when I'm alive, because no more harm can come to me. I don't have to be worried about what the market does. I don't have to be worried that I can't pay my bills or that my rent goes up or anything else, or that any injustice happens anymore. Everything will be over, and that's a good thing, especially when you are talking about the worst situation imaginable. And that worst situation will just happen in a few cases, once in 100 cases or 1 in 1,000 cases. And all the other cases, it is much easier. And you don't have to pay the ultimate price for freedom. Does that make any sense? And would you like to answer anything to that?
I don't think it's the case. To me, it's the exception. I think most of the history, there's always been wars going on. And when there's not a war, then people live in slavery through following the orders of their governments. I don't see this world as mostly a peaceful place. I see it mostly as a constant battlefield and war. So, I mean, it's your choice. I think you would likely be executed and then life would go on. I feel like sometimes we have to do compromises in life and pick our battles. And I would tie it to poker. And it's like calling an all-in. The opponent goes all in. If you fold, they will win the pot. They will win the chips. And you could be very strong-willed and minded and be like, I will not stand down. I will not give up. I will go to the end. But then oftentimes you lose the hand and the tournament is going to be over there. So I think it's surrendering is, I think, important part to navigate this life, that the authority is great enough. And like, if you can make these jokes and you don't get any punishment, then yes, you should not follow it. And what you said is true. If they don't actually pose any authority or any sanctions, then why follow it? I get that, but it could change at any moment. And also in some moments, if you're in North Korea, that there's going to be real sanctions. There's no choice there. So if it's a bluff, it won't work. You will say to North Korean officer that kill me or let me be free. And in Switzerland, maybe they will be like, all right, we won't kill you. You can do what you want, whatever. You do your stuff. But in another country, they would be like, oh, and kill you then.
Norman, I get your position. And I get that you don't think it's a good idea to pay the ultimate price. I mean, it's your life. If you want to live... sorry?
Die, and we will all pay the ultimate price.
But you don't want to pay it now.
The only question is when to pay it and what to pay it for.
I understand that. And you're perfectly right. It's a moral question. And your philosophy and your inclination can be a little different from mine. and your choices can be different from mine. And I totally respect your choice and your way of looking at it. But there was something else I wanted to say. Let me think if I can get it back, the thought. I just want to give you a couple of examples. Look at the anarchist I was talking at the beginning. He's Australian and he managed to not comply and the sanctions weren't that bad for him. You tell me, yeah, but he's an activist and he has a very marginal life. Yes, but before that he had a couple of jobs and he still never complied. And the sanctions weren't the most extreme. I want to talk about my stepdad. So my stepdad was a very poor man, but he also never complied to anything. That's just simply because he was poor and lazy and he didn't want to work his entire life, which is funny to me. But he still managed somehow to survive. Mostly it was people who gave him some money or his wife, people he met. Then he wasn't honest. So, for example, if he meets you, he would tell in a soiree, he would tell you, can you lend me like $10 or $100? And if you say yes, he says, I'll pay you back very soon. But he'll never pay you back. And he does that with everything, with cars, with everything. But people realize that they're cheat and then he comes into prison. Well, then he goes to prison and then he goes out of prison and he starts all over again. He wasn't very smart, but he had a way of talking to people and people liked listening to him, even though everything he said was crap. But people liked listening to him, so they were inclined to do what he says. And when they did, well, then they lost everything they gave him. But the sanction was never extreme, and he was a Dutch guy. So I'm giving you an Australian, I give you a Dutch guy. And for the rest, I will also give you another guy. He's McAfee. So McAfee also decided not to fill out the documents of the IRS and to live as an anarchist. He had a huge fortune. I think it was 100 millions or 500 millions. It might have been 500 millions. But he lost it all in the markets. And then after losing that all, he realized that he cannot go on with his life as before. He still made money, but he stopped paying any taxes. And he lived as an anarchist in the international waters on his ship. But at the end of his life, he went to Spain and the authorities stopped him because America wanted him back in front of the judge and put him in a jail. And then when he was in jail, he decided that the moment has come to stop living. He was already old, 17, 80 years old, and he just killed himself in jail. He committed suicide and he stopped. But even there, with the American state who isn't that inclined to show mercy, he still managed to live his entire life to become old by being an anarchist. So it is not totally impossible to be an anarchist, even in the world we live in. And now it's the hardest, because most people believe in authority and will automatically comply, whatever they say. But that can change very fast as soon as the mind virus gets around, as soon as people listen a little more to anarchist force and anarchist people. But they lose all authority if you don't comply spontaneously. And using violence against you will be too much effort. That's my point. Maybe I don't get it across, and I don't think you'll agree with it, but that's what I think right now. And thank you a lot for that discussion. I really enjoyed it. Tell me what you want to say. I'll let you finish on the subject.
I would say if it's a well-working system, there's always going to be some room there for, it's called the freeloaders. So someone finds some small point in the system where they can find that place where they don't have to do too much and they won't get too many punishments. So you could say these are clever people, usually I think clever and lazy, right? Someone who's not very ambitious, but they have to be smart enough to find this spot. And yes, if 100 slaves are working very hard and then one slave is able to only act like they're working, but actually is just being lazy, and the other slaves won't tell on him or somehow is able to hide it and be very clever and sneaky. And they say it's in bureaucracies or big businesses, sometimes there's been news, right, that someone was like in a big company like Google, or it wasn't Google, but some other big company, and they didn't do anything there for like 10, 20 years. And there's been different stories on that, and they just got all the benefit. it only works for exceptions. I would say that it only works for if enough people are this-minded, then the system would collapse and it wouldn't work. There can be, as an exception, someone who finds this wave, but for most it wouldn't be like that. So it's possible for sure. I mean, I'm sure there's so many stories that's been like that. There was like a footballer who didn't know how to play football. And they're also like, what's the word I'm looking for? There's like, well, they're a little bit like magicians or like con artists. Yes, they're called con artists. So some people do all these scams, but you could also have a different way of, it's everywhere like this. In school, there's a group project and someone doesn't do the work but gets the same grade as other people in a group project. And usually, yes, these people aren't liked too much. They don't have too many friends, and if you do these things, then you can have some success with it, but you won't have great success. It will be limited in its capacity. So, or maybe not. Maybe someone can get even to be a president being like that. I don't know. But I mean, but if too many people think like that, then we wouldn't have this society. If no one wanted to work, we wouldn't have all these things like we are used to right now, like electricity or water and so on. If everyone was thinking in this way that they don't want to work. So the only way we have this capacity for the life it is that there are people who do want to work. And I mean, I don't think it's too bad you could even compartmentalize. Wow, I'm really struggling with my words today. Compartmentalize. So you could accept that for 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, so 40 hours, you're a slave for the benefit that the other time will be better. And maybe even the slave time isn't so bad, and you get to improve in some ways and develop in, like, some people are philosophy teachers. So if they're interested in philosophy, it's connected through all this. So what am I trying to say with this? That it's maybe not so bad to be a slave sometime. Would it really be better I'm thinking from like a personal perspective that I also often feel like I don't want to work. And I've also had these periods when I've been very successful with poker. And I've found that now I have a lot of money and now I can just have all the leisure time in the world. But I'm not a billionaire or even a millionaire. So at some point, money starts to go less and less. And then I feel like I have to either change the way I live or want to work. So want to work, not because you want to work, but you want the benefits of the work. So in that sense, it's sometimes not even so bad to do something difficult because it might make everything else better. I mean, overall, I feel quite happy with the system I'm in. So I'm a very obedient, slave-minded person in this way that it's not, could be all better, but there's also some enjoyment in work. I mean, I think that it's also the mindset. My father actually tried to teach me that long time, and I'm still trying to learn this, but I have experienced this also, my father told me with these obligations I had at home, and that if my approach to them is that I'm a slave now, it's a punishment, then I won't enjoy these activities. But if I tell myself as a slave that it's actually good that I do it and it's a little bit fun as well, and it's not so bad, I look at the positive side of it, then it doesn't feel so much as slavery. And I do believe in that if you feel like this, I'm a slave, this is the worst thing that can happen to me, and things like that, and then it will be very difficult. Everything you will do, every movement will feel like it's the worst thing that happens in the world, and it's so difficult. But once you find some enjoyment and fun in it and try to find aspects you like about it, see the positive side, see the benefits of it, that it's nice if we have a nice fence around the house and it looks pretty, and maybe I learn some new tool and develop my hand-eye coordination, and it's children like coloring books and stuff like that. So it's kind of like that. You could see the fun in that as well. So personally, I've struggled a lot with that as well. That I like talking to people. I like teaching, but it's not like every time it's still work. It's still sometimes difficult, or I would want to rest and not do it, want to do something else. Same with poker. Sometimes I would rather just relax on a beach and just sleep or do anything else. And now I have to play poker, and even if I'm good at it, it's not always easy to do it. But if I only focus on that, I don't want to do it. I hate it. I have to now play poker 6 hours. Then I feel like that's the worst way to live. I feel like the best way is if I can see the fun side of it and find some enjoyment of it. And then if it goes very well, then ideally when it's been my best times in life, that's when everything feels like the work doesn't feel like work. Work actually feels like play. It feels like having fun, enjoying it. And for that, it has to be, work can't be too difficult because then it's too stressful, but it can't be too easy, then it's too boring. So if I was like some work that I'm too smart for, or whatever the case, then it would be boring for me to do it. If it would be work I'm not, not qualified for, and I wouldn't know enough, then it would be too stressful to do it. But if it's the good balance between two, that I'm pretty good at it and it's not too difficult, but it's not too boring or too easy either, then it can be actually quite enjoyable. And then life feels very nice, that you get the benefits from the work. Work itself is quite good. And then even as a slave, I don't see it as a slave, but I can also see it as a freedom or as a privilege. Sometimes about walking, I have to walk somewhere and I'm thinking this is so tiring and I'd rather just relax and not have to do this. But then you look at someone in a wheelchair, they're dreaming that they could walk. So same with poker. I'm thinking I've done it so infinite time. It's not fun at all. There's other people who would dream that they could be a poker player and play it well. So I think it's a mental perspective as well, that you can look at something as slavery and oppression, but you can also see it as opportunity, privilege. You can see it in positive lights. You can see it as a way to self-develop. Even in North Korean army, I think there's some things you would learn there. I think there's some positive ways you could approach it. So even in some southern state in US as a slave, I think there's some benefits. And if you say to yourself in the morning, I'm not a slave who's going to go on the field to pick cotton, but instead I'm an athlete and I'm going to try to pick as many cottons as I can today. And I will be in fresh air and I will get nice food later. And I'll become a very big, muscular black man through all this hard work that I'm doing. And other people would only dream of being in good shape as some of these slaves were. And even the slave master will look at the slave and think that I wish I was as strong, as healthy and as some of these slaves. Then suddenly it's this mindset thing of seeing as it's a slavery, or there's truth in it. It's just what do you focus on? So I think it's maybe too negativistic outlook on these people who are just trying to do the least, always trying to be. And I think I've also been like this a lot, where I always think of what I don't want to do and I now have to do it and things like that. I think that makes it difficult. But yeah, to more see it as opportunity, and you never know what good can come, and there's always something. If I think of some of the slave moments I've had, some things I never really liked to do, thinking back, some of this were my best memories as well, and some of the best experiences that I would have never imagined. I now remember when I was mowing the grass, I hated doing it, but I was wearing my earphones and I was listening to some Italian lessons, for example. And then I was talking to myself in Italian and learning some Italian while doing that. And I still remember it. And suddenly all that hard work, I remember it in a positive light. I remember it as something nice that happened. So lastly, as a philosophical thinking, I think there's something stoic about this as well, that it's not the occurrences that define it. It's not the work that defines you. It's not the situations you're in or the hardships. It's more how you approach those hardships. And it would be, in my view, very honorable if someone is in difficulties, but they're still able to be positive and happy and find a good thing about it and share the joy of it. If all the slaves are very unhappy on the field, but then one slave starts making jokes there and now everyone's laughing and a bit more happy, that's a small miracle or something beautiful that also happened. And sometimes very beautiful things can also happen from, I think it's a big part of the mindset to try to have a good mindset about these things.
Norman, thank you a lot for sharing your opinions and your thoughts. I found it was very interesting and enriching. And like you told me in one of our poker lessons, I've get the impression that we reach another level. Even if we talk about anarchy, our way of looking at it and discussing the subject has evolved. And that's very interesting to me. And I will think about what you said, and my subconscious, even if I don't do it on purpose, my subconscious will think about it. And I will have a discussion with myself thanks to the topics you brought. And maybe it will inspire one more passage in one of my books that I'm writing. So for all you did, all the time you took today and everything you brought up, I really enjoyed having this discussion with you. I'm really very privileged that from time to time we can do that. Now, my question is, how do you feel? Because our discussion was extremely long. I wanted only to talk about the subject like 15 or 30 minutes, but not for 2 hours. And now we have done 2 hours. So how do you feel and how would you like to proceed? Would you like, there are different options. Either we skip poker this week, meet you another day, or I have enough energy to look at some hands. So we could look at a couple of hands. We don't have to do much. But I don't know how you feel and how you would like to proceed. If you just want to skip poker for this week, this is perfectly fine with me. I would have liked to talk about poker too, but I realized since we have spent so much time discussing anarchy that it might not be possible this week. And I wouldn't have any bad feelings because of that. I would just regret because I really enjoy our poker lessons, but then I'll do it next week instead of doing it this week. So as you wish, tell me of the 3 different alternatives, which one you think is the best and how you feel about them.
You're a good slave master in that you give options. You say to the public, you can choose Democrats or you can choose Republicans, but now you choice. That's still part of being a slave master.
Well, I really don't see myself as a slave master with you. I don't think our relationship is based on coercion, on violence. So I hope that my small contribution to you is to some help. And I hope that you get something out of meeting me and that you don't mind seeing me once a week, because I enjoy seeing you. And since you do a lot for me, I'm glad that I can also do something for you. But I don't believe, if you compare me to a slave master, I don't think that that's very accurate. I see you much more as a friend. And I don't think that if we are friends, that any way of using coercion or violence is possible. So a slave master uses that.
I was joking. I wasn't serious there. I was joking that you gave me a list of options and that's...
I gave you a list of options because those are the 3 that come to mind. If you see a 4th one, you can give it. And if it is acceptable, I will.
There's a difference if you pose the question, what would you want to do about it? And here's some options as an example. Or if you ask someone, choose one of the 3 options. That's way more authoritative way of posing it.
You're correct, Norman. But sometimes I speak very fast and I didn't have time to think about every detail. But since you correct me, then give me one more option.
All good. No, it's not. So firstly, I would say that I appreciate that you showed your appreciation and acknowledgement of this conversation we had. It's good to know this. And also, I think I learned or developed through it. And you also shared your thoughts and your points of view. And I think I will also think about it deeper, and also through this probably be more mindful of the slave aspects of our lives and the restrictions and obligations that we're put under. So I think hopefully it will also do me good to be more observant, or like you said, even subconsciously to think about these things from time to time. I think it helps to find our freedom in a way to be able to think about these things. So thank you as well for listening and taking my points into account as well. That's good. And now with poker for today, I think we can continue now to poker. It is extremely long lesson, but I think that's the best because I don't want to completely skip over it for this week. I do think it's interesting also to see how you've been doing and all these things to improve your poker. And last week we worked on quite difficult topics. I felt like it was like a new level in some way of approaching poker for you. So I think it's good to not take a step back, but to keep on pushing forward to see if we can keep on improving on that. So I would like to do some poker stuff and talk through these things now. So yes, we can move on to the poker side of it.
Great. I admire your stoic dedication and your energy that after such a long discussion, you still find enough strength to look at some hands. So I really admire that. Don't do more than you like. When it's enough, just tell me, I think it's a good moment to stop, and we stop there. After one hand, 2, 5, whatever, as you feel it. And now, don't you need a little break, for example, to go to the toilet or to drink something? Would you like to have a little break?
That's a good idea. I like that. Good you brought that up. Let's take like a 2-minute break.
You're an extremely generous guy, as I always told you.
Maybe too generous.
Maybe too. You can think about it and make the next lessons only 45 minutes if you want. I'm joking. But it's a moral value. Being a generous person and caring about your student and about what they do and what they think, that's something that I can appreciate for it. I had different teachers, and if I chose you, it's because I felt the best with you, with the quality of your work and also your moral and your dedication. But that doesn't mean you have to do what you did today every day. It just means that there's a reason why I chose you. And if you weren't such a great guy, probably I would have skipped you just as I skipped a lot of other people.
Difficulties with it too, right? Because there's also this saying that the more you give, the more they ask.
Do I do that? Do you think I do that, Norman?
Well, you shouldn't take it so personally in this case, I think. I think you can be the judge of that. And I think it would be a bit harsh for me to say something like this about you. But in general, and the thing is, I have every given time, I think I have something like 10 different people. Sometimes it gets a bit much, but then, well, it's for me to figure out how to find the balance within. So I think for now it's good for today. And if it wasn't, like you said, I have a mouth and I can say that it's enough for today or so on. But I think that this side of me I'd have to develop more. I think I've had some struggles in life where it's difficult to say no sometimes because I want to make people happy or want to have like good social relationships and so on, but sometimes it can be a lot. So I don't want you to take it personally. I'm just generally speaking about this. And there has been some even bigger problems with some students. I mean, it's all good. It's like, I shouldn't look at it too negatively. I think I'm overall very happy with my life as it is right now. I feel like it maybe never been better how things are going, or near as good as things have been going. But it's difficult, this time management overall, I guess. Sometimes it can be tricky. It's difficult either way. Sometimes it's bad if there's not enough work, and sometimes when there's too much. I remember some days where I've had like 10 hours of lessons in a row, and then I feel like it's too much. And then sometimes 2-3 days I don't have any lessons. And then I think that's also what I don't want. But in general, it's pretty good. And I guess I'll learn through this to schedule things better moving forward. Or, I mean, right now for today, I feel good. So it's not like a current issue. It's more in general, I'm thinking now overall how to approach things.
That you always can talk to me, and if it's an issue, wants to meet me or something else, just say, and we find the best solution. So don't worry. To keep on joking, I'll try to be the most kind slave master possible, but that's just a joke,
I appreciate it. Yes, I think we've had pretty good communication. So I think overall, if some lessons I'm like, oh, I have to do this lesson and I don't really like this, then with you, I feel overall it's been, I look forward to our meetings and also your discussions, or when you send me stuff, it's been interesting. And like this movie, Transplantation, maybe I would have never heard or watched it. And you're right, it is a very good and thought-provoking movie, and all the other stuff as well. So I think overall, our relationship has been pretty good so far.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Norman. Would you like to look at some of my hands, or have you something else planned?
I mean, a lot of what I'm planning is to do more of the deeper stacked hands and do some hand analysis and continue what we did last week. So get you better at average hand, thinking about the opponent action, what it's telling. But before we, and a good way to improve it is through these hand reviews. But I think before that, maybe give a quick or not so quick summary of how poker has been going. How much have you playing? How do you feel about it at the moment? What's your kind of outlook or overview of it?
I was quite happy because I went $30 above my break even, and I thought that was great because it happened very fast, the $30 jump. And I thought if I make 30 more, well, then it would be enough confirmation to go to level 2. But then I lost it all. And I was nearly again back to break even, a little above 1 or 2 USD. And the last 2 games I played, I finished first, so that put me again a little higher. So I still go through immense periods of losing, but it is because I do stupid things, and also because the variance is not always going in my favor. Because sometimes all your all-ins, they just fail. And even if you take the right decisions, I do take a lot of bad decisions, but sometimes even if I do everything right, well, I just get unlucky for a long period of time. I've lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 times I didn't enter the bubble, and that did eat away all my the thing that I was above break even. So I still go through a lot of pain, but actually I enjoy that because I think it's a great lesson. The worst thing that could happen is if I lose my bankroll, because it's not that I really care about the money, but since I'm playing low stack and the bankroll isn't that huge. But it would be very hard for my ego to go through that. And that would be a great lesson for me from a psychological standpoint. But it's very painful when you have 9 games in a row where you don't enter the bubble, because that's not normal. Normally, I should be in the bubble quite frequently every second game that I play, and I should not go through such extended losing periods. Now, I would say 50% I played bad and 50% I was just unlucky. But anyways, to me, it's a great lesson. The more pain I feel playing poker, the better it is. But I don't want to overdo it. So there were days where I only played 1 game a day because it was painful. And I also did a lot of other stuff. But then there are again days where I play 4 or 5. I try to play 8 games a day. So it's a little better. Anyways, that's a summary.
What can I comment about it? It's difficult, but to see the positive sides of it, I think it's good to see that. And I also think it's good even to play 1 game a day and to play none at all. So that's something that I also try to do, that sometimes feel better, sometimes feel worse, but always to try even on a bad day to do a little bit is better than not at all. I think that's very good that you've been able to sustain that. And that's also quite common for someone to win a lot and then start losing a lot. Sometimes mindset shifts based on how we're doing. So if you won a lot, you're probably feeling very good. and that you're playing very well. And it adds some confidence, which is good sometimes, but sometimes it can also backfire and be the downfall of being too confident. And another time, so it depends. It can happen often that when someone wins quickly, they can also lose quickly. What I like to tell myself is whenever it keeps going very well, to calm myself down and say it could change every moment. And just because I've been winning a lot doesn't mean I have figured everything out and it could all go bad any moment. I also like saying that when I get dealt aces, to be like, okay, this could go badly and I have to be cautious and maybe this won't go so well. And on the other side, when I am doing badly, to think about, well, it's not always been that you lost 9 tournaments in a row, so it's an exception, and likely it won't stay like this. You haven't forgotten all the skills. It's not like you are a completely bad player because of it. And now to think the good sides of it and to have the self-belief and confidence that it can turn around and go to your favor in the future. So that's some mental poker tips on that.
Thank you for that. I think that there's something else wrong with me. And I think it's related to my ego. The good thing in the market is when I lose and things go bad, I'm not mad. Because I'm not mad because I know that the market is so hard. And what I do is already so much better than most people. Even when I listen to great analysts, I believe that what I do is much better. But I also believe that it's extremely hard and that there's a reason why 98% and even institutional traders lose money. So I'm not mad at me when I lose in the markets most of the time. Maybe that will change. It always depends on how much you are playing and how much is at stake. So if I take a really, really bad losses and it really hurts me because I might end up losing my entire capital, yeah, then of course my feelings might totally shift. But right now that's not the case. But what hurt me the most when I was playing poker and had those 9 losing tournaments without entering the bar, what hurt me the most was one case. And it was a case where I was playing against a big fish. Now, I didn't know at the start that I was playing against a big fish, but he went always all in and he always showed a lot of strength. But the board was dangerous. There was the risk of a straight, there was the risk of flush, there was risk that I had only queens and there was an ace. So every time I folded. And every time he managed to get not just a bit, but sometimes even more than a bit, because sometimes I had to call and then I had to fold because he went again all in. And the thing is, at the end, I figured out that he was totally crazy. I mean, he ended with 5-7 suited a thing. And then when he had made a 5 on the board, and it was the lowest thing on the board, and the board was very dangerous, he still went all in with his button pair. And I was telling myself, I think that against him, most of the time I folded when I had the winning hand. And that really hurt me because a big fish had it nice against me. And that hurt me because I knew that at the end I figured out when I saw his hand that he was doing total nonsense. And still he decimated me again and again. And that hurted me because I thought my ego was hurt because I was beaten up by just such a low player. And that's the ego trip. I feel like that I'm too good and that such an injustice should not happen. And I'm expecting too much out of the game. I'm expecting justice where there is no justice. It's like if I tell you there's justice in front of our courts when I don't believe in it. Do you get a little what I say? And that it's an ego trip. I think I'm too good and I should not be treated that way from fortune.
Yes.
So I didn't get mad, but it hurt me a lot that I lost so much against that big fish.
Poker is a very humbling game. I know exactly what this means, that sometimes against someone who you think is a much better player, you could do quite well and have good results. And then someone who you think is the worst player in the world, and you could actually lose against them. It's happened many times. Yes, and my biggest losses have been against some of the players I think know the least about poker and just click random buttons. So I think what helps with that is over time my mindset has shifted in that I try to give every opponent their due respect, and also to know that I'm not guaranteed anything, and also that anyone can win and beat me. I think that's a good mindset to have. So then even if it happens, then it's more like you should expect this and be surprised by it. I think that's the thing I'm trying to say, that you should expect that it's such a complicated game and that no one's perfect at it. And we're all going to struggle, and sometimes even struggle against someone you would find it impossible. How can you lose against someone like, but it can happen. And it will happen. I want to summarize it in a way. We're all humans at the end of the day. We're all men and we're all fallible. You could be the Caesar, you could be the king, you could be the emperor, and you can fall sick, you can lose your spot, you can die, anything can happen. And the same is true in poker. You can have aces, the other player can have 7-2 off, and you can lose at that moment as well. So I think it's very important to be mentally ready for it. I think that's what they say in boxing, that the punch that knocks someone out is not always the punch that is the strongest punch, but it's the punch you don't see coming. It's the punch that surprises you. So mentally, this is also in poker, that if the opponent surprises you with their play, which can be completely a bad play, but if it works to surprise you, then it can be very effective. So for that, I think the best thing to have always, however unlikely something is, to keep some doubt in every scenario. So it will help that if they show you that 5, that bottom pair, that they maybe played very terrible, your reaction wouldn't be to be surprised by that, but to be that it's not very likely, but it's going to happen, and I'm prepared for that. And I think that's the same true in markets. If I think of a good trader or a good fund manager, then I don't want them to be surprised if a financial crisis happens. I don't want them to fear that every day also too much, and every day think that it has to be a market crash today. But I would want them to be prepared for it in some sense. And also, even if something 1 in 1,000 happens, to be like, not be overly surprised if it does happen, and be that in a mindset that these things will happen time to time, and I'm prepared and I know it will happen. I think it's important to have that mindset. So if the mindset is that it will never happen because it's so unlikely, I don't like that mindset. So I like more the mindset of that it's probably not going to happen. It's very unlikely to happen, but when it doesn't, it's a big thing, actually. I think it's a big thing in the mindset for this to be. It's mentally way easier to deal with a hand that you lose and they have something stupid if afterwards you're like in a mindset that you expected this in some capacity. So I think the really difficulty in poker is if you feel like you completely get outplayed and you didn't expect that at all. So I think just going through these experiences will help you as well. So you will see that these things happen in poker, and these bad players sometimes win the tournament or win a big hand versus you, and you had a plan and you think that you bet this way and they would fold bottom pair, and that plan didn't work this time. Doesn't mean it was a bad plan, just didn't work this time with this opponent, and just to accept this as part of the reality.
Thank you, Norman. But I think I have an underlying issue, psychological, that makes my life harder. For example, it's not just in poker, but when, for example, a police officer starts bossing me around, and I might want to answer and humiliate him, because I think it's a huge joke that just because he got a badge, he now thinks he can boss me around. Or another example, I had to see a lawyer for a family issue. And the lawyer, once he was lying a lot. And the other thing is, everything he told me to do and everything he proposed was very bad advice. And then he added stuff like, if you do that, you'll make big money. And I wanted to flip him. I wanted to humiliate him and tell him, man, once, everything you say is the worst advice possible. And secondary, you have no idea what it is making big money. How can you dare stand in front of me? You are incapable in the free market of making 5 USD. And you tell me how I'm gonna make big money with all the nonsense and all the lies you present to me. And I get very angry. And it takes a lot of work on myself to not flip, because if I start humiliating him and I start talking back, it will make everything just worse. You just have to put a smile on and go on with your life, because you can never change that kind of attitude. If he thinks that that's normal, and if he cannot come up with anything better than that, well, there's no way of me changing his beliefs. But for me, it's very hard. And if I get angry or if I react to that, it's really bad. And I think it's a little the same when suddenly I face a bad poker player and he laughs and he managed to win not just once, but 2 or 3 times money against me. Well, then it's very hard. And my way of dealing with it is actually avoiding them, avoiding the police officer who wants to boss me around, or avoiding the lawyer who gives me bad advice, because that's the best thing you do in normal life. But on a poker table, that's not what you can do, since you will face those kinds of individuals again and again. And it's part of the game. But it's an underlying thing. Not everybody gets really mad when you get bad advice or when somebody is lying. But I think it's not normal, because I don't understand why you spend your day talking like this or acting like this. I think you could do much better. So I'm very disappointed. And I don't like the lies and I don't like the bad advice. I have a tendency of getting very angry. And if I don't pay big attention on what I say, I would make everything worse. But that's an underlying thing, because not everybody reacts the same. And it is just when you face random people. I think I would never get that angry with you or Marianne, even if she says crap and bullshit. I would never get angry, because I know her and I know that I can work on her and make her better. But to a random guy, I feel there's no time to use any psychology, to have any discussion with them. And the only thing you can do is humiliate them so they stop. And that's a very bad way of thinking, because it makes everything just worse. You don't have to add much on that, but I just wanted to tell you that I think that there's something wrong with my psychology. And you said that I'm arrogant, and that's not the perfect word, but yes, I can be arrogant. For example, if I'm Trump and they suddenly want to go through all my stuff and make up crap to impeach me, yeah, I want to humiliate the guy. What the fuck do you think you are? Who the fuck do you think you are? Do you know how much my villa is worth? And you with your little salary and your little stupid stuff you have learned. You come here and tell me what documents I can have and what I can do and what documents I can sign. Yes, I would want to humiliate them, but that's a very bad state of mind to be in. So I think there's something wrong with me in that regard.
I mean, psychology is difficult, so I think we all have our underlying issues in that regard.
Thank you. I will try to work on it and I will try to improve. Normally I can control myself and I don't do what my impulses, my sentiments tell me. But I think the underlying thing is an ego trip. I think I should be above that and that should not happen. So do I share my hands or do you want to see Poker Tracker, the software?
Let's look at those hands.
So I did 3 bet him. I went for 5x and he called and he was just limping. So I thought there was a chance he would fold, but he did not. And now we see the flop and he's limping again. So what do I do with somebody who keeps limping? The flop is not in my favor, but I don't think it is in his favor too. And now I don't think there's much chance he would fold or not call, but I might have thought different when I played. What do you think?
In general, this is considered a dangerous board. Any 7, any 8 is a straight or a straight draw. Having 1 7, 1 8 would be a straight draw. Any 2 hearts would be a flush draw. Any 2 higher cards is often also a straight draw, like King Jack is straight draw, King Queen is straight draw, Queen Jack is straight draw. So really, there isn't too many hands that don't like this board. If he has pocket 4s, pocket 5s, maybe he will fold. And if he has something like ace 3, maybe he will fold. But it's not a very easy spot to get him to fold. Any 10 will call, any 9, all the straight draws, flush draws. So at this point, I think your best chance here is to just call and hopefully you hit an ace or a jack or improve in some way. I think if you raise here, I don't think you will fold.
And I did just that. Now comes a 7, it makes the board even more dangerous. He goes for 5 big blinds, and should I fold? The thing is, I have to be right 20% of the time. And I have 6 out, which makes 12%. So I don't have enough outs to call, so I should fold, but I did not.
I would say it's a mistake to continue here on the turn.
Okay, and now a 6 comes, he goes for 5 again, and I fold.
So one mistake on the turn, otherwise, yeah. So difficult hand.
But my thinking was right here when I said that I have 20%. When he went, because it says on the poker cracker outs 20%. And it says also that I had 6 outs. 6 times 2 makes 12. So that calculation was correct, that I had to fold. That calculation was correct.
Yes, you should fold here.
But you can confirm that what I'm calculating was correct, can you not? But the thing is, I'm asking you that because my outs calculator should have given me 20%, and I should have seen that I have 6 outs. So I should have seen that I should have folded, and I did not. So I'm wondering why I did the mistake. That's why. I'm wondering if my way of going through the calculation is wrong, and if in reality I had something more or something was off.
Well, 8 would also make you a straight here, so that's extra out. But the problem here is we're not going to be sure if ace or a jack will be enough to win us this hand. And if he already has a flush, then you have 0 outs. Right? If he has 2 hearts, you have 0 outs then. If he already has a straight, he has an 8. Also, you have very few outs. You would need his 8, which you would have something around 5% if he already has a straight. If he has a flush, you have 0%. And if he has something like 2 pair, then you would have 9%. So, I mean, in any way, looking at this, there's very little hope here. Also, some of the outs you calculated, your 6 outs was ace and jack, but the jack could be a heart. The ace could be a heart. So what if the river is the jack of hearts? You hit your out, but you would lose to very many hands still. So I think there's very little hope here on the turn to win this hand.
So I think when I looked at my outs calculator, I had enough outs to call. I had a little more than 20% outs. But the outs weren't any good, and I shouldn't have done it. It was too dangerous. Thank you, Norman. So now ace 7 suited. I raise 3 big blinds, and I have 2 callers. Now I have a lot of outs because I'm one from making a flush, and I also have outs for my ace. So outs for my ace are 3, and the flush might be 9 outs. So maybe I have 12 outs. Can you confirm that?
Is a maybe, but something like this, yes, it's a pretty good flop for you. So now you have a choice whether to, let's see what they do first here. Player 3, player 4. So they don't want to bet. So that's good news for you. So you can take a free card and hopefully hit your out, or you can try to make them fold here. If they don't have a king or a jack, there's a good chance they would fold at this moment. So you could also make a big bet, and then if they fold, you don't need to hit your outs.
Should I go for 2/3 of a pot? Because I think my flush draw needs... Should I just go for half pot to make them fold? Because half pot is enough if they have nothing to fold. What do you think?
Do you want them to fold?
Yes, I do.
So then it's better to do a little more than a little less.
Let's see if I did that. I go for 5, half pot.
I think this is could be tempting for them. So I think it would have been better if you had gone more.
And here's very bad news. So now 15. The thing is it enough for me to fold? And I'm not sure. I have to go through the calculation. So we said 12 outs. So 12 times 4 is 48. And here I only need 25% to call. So I think I should call.
I think you have enough to continue here. Although this is not what we wanted to see, for him to check raise us. That's a strong move. But I do think you should call this 10 chips. And if you make your flush, then you have good chances to hopefully win all his chips.
Great. I did. Now we get a 4. That isn't any good for me. And let's see what he does. He goes for more than half pot. And this time I don't have enough outs to call. Because now it's 12 times 2, which makes 24, and I need 29%. So I cannot continue anymore, and I fold.
Exactly. Hopefully you did. Good. I think this hand was pretty good.
Thank you, Norman. Ace 6 suited. I folded. So why do I show you this hand? I think it's obvious that I should fold. Is it not?
I think it's obviously a fold, yes.
Now, Jack. I raise 3 big blinds. I'm deep stacked. I have 1 caller. Now we see an ace and 2 nines. So both of them could beat me. He could have 3 of a kind or an ace that beats me. So it's no good for me. The flop is no good for me.
The good news is maybe it's also not good for him. So I think you should check and see if he likes it or not. But I don't think you should bet here.
But the thing is, I initiate the aggression. And normally I should continue the aggression on the flop because
I don't think it's necessary in this case. I think in this case, it's a good time to slow down. And if he has, let's say he has pocket sixes, then you will win this hand, right? You don't need to show more aggression. And if he has ace or not, then you will lose this. You will lose more then. So I think a good way for you would be to see what he wants to do and slow down here. You are correct in saying that very often if you were the aggressor, you want to continue the aggression, but it's not always true. So sometimes we want to slow down. And in this case, I don't see too many benefits in continuing the aggression.
Why is there not many benefits? Because
if you fold, then you get to know you had the best hand, but you would have won it very likely anyway. You will fold if he doesn't have a 9 or an ace. So why do we want that to happen? We don't need that to happen. And if he continues, well, then we just lose more if he has an ace or a 9.
The thing is, normally I do my continuation bet because it often works quite nice. And here, I should not do it. And the only thing I can come up with is that the 2 nines and an ace are very dangerous. I'm a little less worried about the flush because I have 1, what is it called? 1 spades. Diamond. The 9 is spades because I have 1 diamond. But so it's just too dangerous to make my continuation bet. Is that how I should look at it?
So will he ever call a worse hand here?
How much does there go? Half pot? So can he call a worse hand with pocket sixes? He should not.
So then it means you're basically bluffing. So you're bluffing. If you're not value betting, you're bluffing in poker. And in my mind, we don't need to bluff with jacks. We have a good hand. We don't have to bet here and pretend we have an ace or bluff with this. And it's very early on as well. So I don't see a good reason to bet here. And also, if you don't bet, you see what he wants to do. And I think it's valuable info for you here.
So I get the idea. The idea is that my jacks is good enough and I don't need to bluff with it. Because if he doesn't have anything good, well, then it is safer to try to get him out of the pot. And he checks, it's safer to try to get him out of the pot on the turn. Is that how I can look at it?
I think that's a better way to look at it, yes.
Thank you, Norman. And now there comes 1 more ace. This time I think I will check. I did. And let's see what he does. He goes for half pot. So that's very bad for me. I think I'm beat, so I fold.
I think that's reasonable. You were able to fold your 2 pair on the turn. I think that's the positive side I see in this hand.
Just my continuation bet wasn't a good idea in this scenario. And it wasn't a good idea. I'm sorry to come back for it. It's really bad. It wasn't a good idea because jacks is good enough and I can win without bluffing. And also the board is very dangerous. And because of those 2 arguments, the continuation bet wasn't necessary and I should not have done it. Is there anything else I have to add to that train of thought, or do you think it's okay if I think like that?
I think it's pretty good for now.
Great. Thank you, Norman. Pocket 2.
Usually stop when the decision is on you on the hand.
That's not what I meant. I meant when you have enough looking at my hands. How many do I have still left? We are nearly half, but I don't think we will do all of them. There's no need to do all of them today. But I'm just worrying because I'm scared that you are tired and that you had enough. That's why I asked. You tell me when to stop. Mm-hmm. So he goes for 2.2, a raise. The sizing is a little strange because I would understand 2 big blinds or I would understand 3 big blinds, but 2.2 is a little strange. Now, should I call with my pocket 2s and hope to see 2 on the flop, or should I fold my pocket 2s? I have only 10 big blinds left, so anyways, With 10 big blinds, I think it's better to go all in. Should I do that all in with 10 big blinds and pocket twos? If he did fold, yes, then I could do it, and I was not on the big blind, then I could do it. But now I don't think, I think I should fold. Do you agree with that?
No, I think you should go all in.
Are you joking? So if you're serious, then I'm thinking wrong. Why should I go all in with pocket twos? And the pocket twos is the lowest strength card that I would do an all in. And I already have an aggressor who puts 2 big blinds. So he's not telling me that he has a random card. So should I still take the risk?
So we're not on the bubble, so we're not risking too much. We're currently in 5th place out of 6. The reward is very big if he folds. If he folds, you win 4.6 big blinds. That's a lot. And also, if he calls your all in, very often you have a 50 chance, which is not great, but it's pretty good. If he has ace queen, ace 10, all these hands, you have 50% chance. So I do think all in is the good play here.
Thank you, Norman. I made the wrong decision. Now, Queen, Jack suited. I go for 2 big blinds, have somebody who's 3-betting me, but for now there's a lot in the pot, so I have to call, and my hand is quite strong. So I definitely cannot fold. I see a jack, which is nice, but I don't have an ace, which is dangerous. And he's representing an ace with his 3-bet. So I think I should only check. I did. And now let's see what he goes for. Very long, small bet. So is he doing only a continuation bet, or does he have the ace?
I guess we don't know, but I think it's clear what we should do next.
So you want me to fold, Norman?
No, I think you should call.
And you want me to call because he's betting very small and the reward is huge, 11.17 big blinds.
Yes, and also our hand can improve. You can hit a queen, a jack, so you have some chances even if he has an ace. But there's good chance he doesn't always have an ace. Maybe he has hands, maybe he has just a bluff. So he's not betting very big here. It's a small risk for a good reward.
And would that have been the same if he would have gone for 2/3 of a pot instead of making a small bet? Would the decision still have been the same? Should I then still call or should I fold? The thing is, in that case, it would have been 25% chance. He would have asked 29%. I think 2/3 of a pot is 29%. In that case, I only have 3 outs to improve. So in that case, I think I should fold if he goes for 2/3 of a pot, or should I even then call?
I mean, it would be a more difficult situation then. You would need 28% against 2/3 bet. And well, I think then it would depend how aggressive you think the opponent is. So then it wouldn't be clear. But thankfully, he didn't put you to that decision here. But I think it would be fine either way then. If you called or folded, I think both would be close decisions in their value.
Okay. Thank you, Norman. But I think I would have been cautious and folded. But you said that it wouldn't be such a bad decision. Now I call, as I should, and here comes 7, which isn't very scary. So I think I should only check and see what he does. And he goes again for a very small bet. Now it's the same question as before. I think my hand is strong enough and the reward is big enough. And he might be a stupid player doing that with a 7, but he might also be sneaky and have that ace. So I think the reward is too high and I cannot fold. But what do you say?
If he has an ace, he's betting very weak with it. So I think it's good chances he doesn't have an ace. So I would continue.
Yeah, that's what I did. And now we see a 10. And since we have 3 diamond, it's very dangerous. So I will check again and let's see what he does. He checks and he wins. But I did everything correct. Did I not?
I think you played this hand quite well, yes. So it just happened to have a little bit of a stronger jack than you did. But you didn't lose a big pot with this. You lost 3 big blinds pre-flop and then 2.5, 2.5. So yeah, I think things happen. I mean, the good side is you managed the losses this hand. And I still think you had many outs. If we think of the turn, if you go back to turn, even if we had seen or known his hand on the turn, and click forward after he bets. So you need 13% here, and we can still hit a queen, which happens around 7%. So that wouldn't be enough. But we can also get half the pot if a 3 or a 7 comes. And then it would be 2 pair, jacks and 7s with an ace kicker, or jacks and 3s with an ace kicker. And that would be 6 outs, around 14% that you would win half the pot. Then I think taking all of that into consideration, I think it's fine to continue here.
Great. Thank you, Norman. But one small detail. You said the queen, I have out for the queen. If I did understand what you said 7%. And I think it's 3 outs for a queen, so 6%. So you did push that a little up to 7. Why did you do that?
Because we're on the turn, we see one more card, and this math rule of multiplying by 2, that's in some cases it's underestimating it a little bit. And there's 46 cards in the deck that are possible to come, and we have 3 out of 46 chance. So that's 6.5217 and so on percent. So it's more than 6.5%. So it's closer to 7 than to 6%. So this rule of 2 and 4, even though it's a rule, it's a math trick. So it's a simplification. The actual math is sometimes a little bit more complicated.
Great, thank you, Norman. But my remark is like when we talked about the same thing in the past, is that I don't think you can make a different decision between 6 and 7%, because I'm not sure that you can be that precise. Anyways, it's very interesting. Thank you, Norman. Can I move on to the next hand?
Yeah.
I go for 2 big blinds with my 10-9. I have 1 caller and I make top pair. So I think, do I want him to call or do I need protection? Well, I think I need protection because if anything higher comes, 10 is not scary, but if a jack, a queen, a king or an ace comes, it would be scary. So I think some protection would be needed. So 2/3 of a pot would be nice. What do you think?
I can see that argument. However, if you bet too big, then a 4 or a 6 will fall. And I'm not sure we want them to fall. I think you can make different arguments here. It's also, if you just win the pot as it is, you're already chip leader. So maybe it would be risky to continue. Although if you do make a big bet and he doesn't fall, then the pot would be very big and we would be nearing an all-in. So I do think it's a difficult decision here, because if we make a big bet, again, it's almost like a bluff, because if it doesn't fold, then we can be too worried here in the future. So yeah, I think we should, I think I wouldn't worry. I think I could even see myself checking here and slowing down and completely abandoning the protection, because player 4 is so short that I don't really want to play a big pot against player 6. And whenever you bet here, even if you bet half pot and he calls, you're really approaching the danger zone where it could get all in. And if we're wrong in that, then suddenly you get 3rd place. And I think it's important here to not lose our 2nd place. So for that, I think it's fine to give him a free card and see what happens on the turn.
But how could I be wrong? Because I have top pair and a 6 and a 4 is not so dangerous to me. I didn't mention that, but I could even do an all-in and just win the pot here, which would be nice. So how could I be wrong if he has 2 pairs, a 9 and a 6? But does he play a 9 and a 6? I don't think he does. Or a 9 and a 4, or a 6 and a 4. So how could I be wrong? Does he have a better 9 than I have? Ace 9? That could be possible, but I don't think that the risk is very high of that occurring. So how could I be wrong?
King 9, Queen 9, Jack 9. I mean, there's many possible. The thing is, even if he has a hand like, let's say, has King Queen, will he really fold that King Queen? He might not fold it. And then if the King or a Queen comes, you will lose a much greater pot then. So I don't mind if we bet here. I think it's fine to bet, but it's definitely there is risk to it as we're on the bubble. So we're not on the bubble, but there are still pay jumps. So the 2nd place is a much greater reward than 3rd place. So if you go for a bet here, I'm just thinking about what if he doesn't fold. If he folds, all is good. You got protection. You maybe turn would have been scary. You avoid that. But if it doesn't fold, suddenly I wouldn't feel very comfortable with just 10-9 there. You could have a better 9. You could hit a card on the turn that beats. So I feel like this play would be just going for one outcome, hoping that he folds. If you want to do that, go pot size, make it really scary and try to make him fold. I think it's reasonable to do that. But I would do one or the other here. I would either go very big to really force him out of this pot. And if he doesn't fold, then give up with this. Or I would take the safer, cautious approach and just see the turn.
You think that the safer approach is a little better?
Well, I think it's more prudent.
And in general, playing more prudent is better? Is that what you're telling me? Because with the pocket twos hand we saw before, I chose the more prudent way and I folded. And you said I should have done my all.
We weren't really risking much at that point. There was 6 players left. We were 15 chips with 10 big blinds. In this case, we're risking our second. I mean, we're very close to first place. So if we mess it up, we get third. So you are risking your placement then.
I don't remember what I did, so let's see. I go for half pot and he calls. Do you think that's a bad idea? Because he might call with a 6 and a 4 and you don't want that. So you think that's a bad idea? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's not about this. It's about making the pot. Pot will be 10 chips. You have 12 left. So now you have a hand that's very vulnerable. Any ace, king, queen, jack, 6, 4 will be very dangerous. Even a card like 5 could make a straight out there. And now the pot's very big and our hand is, unless a 10 or a 9 comes, it won't pay. So that's what concerns me. If he has a 6 or a 4, obviously it's great to get half pot, but I think we could have got that half pot later also. If you check the flop, he has a 6 or a 4, you might get another bet on the turn or river. So I don't think there's need for us to rush it.
My idea was he has 15 big blinds. And if he didn't hit anything or didn't make anything, he should fold. I didn't think that he should go on with nothing. So I thought that half pot was enough to make him fold.
I think it's reasonable, although if you want him to fold again, I think you should have gone even bigger and scarier.
Thank you. So he checks. It is a little more dangerous because there could be a straight now, but I'm also closer to straight and I have top pair. So should I keep on with my aggression or should I just check and be prudent?
So the thing is, if you bet a 6 or a 4 will now often fold. And if it doesn't fold, then you're almost all in. And the question is, do you really want to get all in with this hand? And I'm not sure you do. So I think it's reasonable, even as played, to slow down here.
Unfortunately, I did not. And he goes all in. So now I have no chance but to call because the pot is too big and I think I have to call. I don't think I have to fold here.
If you're completely beat, then you should fold. I mean, we still would be in second place if you fold this. So I think there is room to fold here. I mean, he's showing a lot. Your 9 is not good anymore after the play he did here. So why should we call when we're beat? We can't surrender here and you still are more chips than player 4. At least get that second place then. So
Yeah.
I think.
But the thing is, my hand can improve. I can make 2 pair, I can make a straight, if I'm not mistaken.
So what's going to be good for you is a 7. That's 4 outs. And there's also 2 9s and 3 10s. So in total, 9 outs, something around 20% at this point. With the pot odds, it's 17%. So it's close. It looks like a little bit favorable. But if the thing with this is 20% to improve, that means 80% you get third place. So even with the odds how they are here, why would I want 80% third place when you have more chips than player 4? And it's not like a very, very strong draw here. It could also be that you hit a 10, by the way, and a 10 would still lose you. You make 2 pair, but he has something that beats that. He might already have a straight. So if he already has a straight, then you have very few outs. I mean, only the 7, and even that would be a split pot. So, I mean, this is to begin with why I would have played this hand slower with how this hand was checked on the flop or the turn. I mean, now it's an ugly situation. but I still think folding is best here. I think it's maybe you have this 20% chance, but I think it's better to save your 7.6 chips, guarantee your second place, and then go from there. So whatever that the pot's big, but you're not getting this big pot. I mean, at least 80% you're not getting this big pot. So it doesn't matter the pot's big if that means you get third place 80%.
Okay, thank you, Norman. But I think I only looked at the calculation we did, and I saw that 20% is more than 70%, and because of that I called. And that's what I did, even went for all in.
Which is even worse than a call, because if you call, you would have at least some life left on the river to fold. You would have had click one, click backwards place. So 5 more, you would have had 2.6 left, which is not much, but player 4 only has 4.3. So if anything, I think you should call this. Even a call I don't like here. But if you call, at least you leave yourself 2.6 big blinds for the next hand, or actually 2.65 big blinds for the next hand. You would give yourself one more chance the next hand to do a comeback. As you go all in, you don't leave any chances. So I think it's your last hand of the tournament here.
You are correct, Norman. Great.
How many more hands did you have you wanted to review?
No, we don't have to review them all, Norman. I have 3 more hands.
Right on to the next one.
Great. I admire your dedication. It shows a lot. And it shows also that you value me a lot if you're ready to do that much for me. So thanks a lot. I'm very humbled. No, is humbled the right word? I'm very touched by it. I'm not sure humbled is the right word, but grateful is a better word. I'm very grateful. Thank you, Norman. No, you show me a great example. And I hope I'll be as you are one day when I can be in the same situation as you are. I'm a king second pair. He checks. I go for 2/3 of a pot. I thought that protection would be needed.
I don't think so.
You don't want any protection and you don't want me to bet?
I think it's another spot where you could check and see the turn. We have a good hand. If it doesn't have an ace, very likely we win it. If it doesn't have an ace, very likely we will win it. So why make this extra risk? I don't think it's necessary.
Okay, now unfortunately he goes all in and I fold.
Looks like he had that ace. I think your fold is very standard after betting, but I don't think you should have bet there.
Thank you, Norman. Ace queen off. I'm facing an all in and I have ace queen and I can afford to lose this.
And we have a good hand. I think you should call this.
I did and I win.
If you had known he had nines, would you call or fold?
I would have fold.
That would be incorrect. Your hand is almost 50% and you had the correct odds. If you go back, if you see here, one click, no, not so. When the decision is on you pre-flop, but you have not yet made the decision. Yes, you see you need 38% to call it. Your hand has something like 47% against nine. So mandatory call.
I have 10% more, around 10% more. That's what you're saying?
Looks like I overestimated a bit. Looks like you have around 6.5% more, not 10, but still you have way more than 38. So it's way more than enough. Also, you can afford that gamble as you had more than enough to continue even if you lost this hand.
Thank you, Norman. Pocket threes, that might be my last hand. Yes, it is. So I'm facing one limp. I'm on small blind. Pocket threes. Do I make an all-in with my pocket threes? Am I on the bubble? Right now, there are 4 people left, so yes, I'm on the bubble. I think, no, there are more 4 people left, because there's also player 5, player 6, and player 7, they're still in the game. So I think I should go for my all-in, because there's not so much pressure. And maybe I win this, which would be nice. What do you think?
All-in would be very standard here, but if you go all-in and you win this spot, it's 3.55 more, which is pretty good. And also good news is if you lose this spot, you'll have more chips than these players, so you would still be staying in this tournament. So yes, I think almost everyone would go all-in here. If you wanted to be very safe, you could just call, because in this case, you have to call half the big blind and the reward is at least 15 times more. So half the big blind 15 times is 7.5 big blinds, and they both have more than that. So if you somehow knew that these players wouldn't like folding that they really like gambling, that they will call you with king jack and they won't. For these players also, they're also not on the bubble. So they also currently player 4 is in last place and player 1 is almost last place. So also these players might be thinking that we're far from the bubble and that they are wanting to gamble. And that could be the case, especially if they're loose players. And if people limp, they're often loose players. When that's the case, not too much folding happens then when people are loose and gambly and they're not close to the bubble. So if that's the case, then you can call and it would be a profitable call as well. So all in really is a good move. If these players are cautious, will only call you if they have a very good hand and do a lot of folding. And I'm not so sure this is the case. If someone is a limper, that doesn't tell me that they're a very cautious player. So I'm not so sure. I mean, the all in, no one would say that you're wrong going all in here. So it's tough to say any, but 15 big blinds is a lot. You're currently in third place, actually. And if these are two stupid gamblers and one of them will call you with ace-7 and now you're in this 50-50 scenario, I don't know if this is like the best opportunity you would get. If you are more prudent, then likely they will gamble themselves out. There will be 4 players left. And then if you go all in, your all in has a reward there. So the issue with this all-in is, even if you win this all-in, there won't be any big reward for it because there still would be, at that moment, 6 players left. So hand starts with 7 players. If you win the all-in, there are 6 players left. You're still a long way from top 3, top 2, top 1. So I would summarize this as this. If you believe these players will fold, if you believe they are sensible players, who won't gamble with you here, then go for the all-in. But if you think that it's 50% one of them will call because they have short chips and they're trying to gamble, then pocket threes will often be in a 50-50 scenario. And then that means 50%, you don't get anywhere close to top 3 and you get 7th place. And often, good news is, yes, if you lose, you're not out. So you don't get 7th place, but you would have 5, 6 big blinds left. It would be very tough then. Right now, you're in quite a safe position. So I don't mind the just call here. So that's where I would end on, especially as I think these players are likely very gambling.
Norman, thank you. I do the all-in, 1 calls, I make 3 of a kind, and he had a jack and an 8. Do you think it would have been better if I would have chosen the prudent way and didn't take the risk? With my pocket threes against jack 8 suited, I think I was ahead of him.
And actually, in this case, it's very close to 50-50, but he has closer to 51% and you have something like 49%. I mean, it's a straight up gamble at this point. We see that this opponent was not cautious at all. He called an all in with jack 8 suited. He didn't care one bit. Good news for you is you doubled up. So you had a very good outcome of it. Now, if you would have called, you would have had this 3 on the flop. You would have had the jack, and likely you would have gotten all in anyway and won this pot without all this big risk. So what to make of this? I mean, results oriented, you can be very happy, right? Now you're second in chips, you knocked the player out, all went well, but 51% of the time or close to it, let's say half the time, 50% of the time, you would be in the ruins after this hand against the big fish gambler who calls with jack 8 suited. So to me, that's worrying if that happens too often, but you can make your own conclusion. Or how do you see this?
I think that I should have not done it if I was on the bubble. But right now, since I'm far away of the bubble, I still think that taking the risk would have been good. It's not too bad because this time I had a very gambly player, but normally should have folded. So I don't think it was all bad. And you agreed that normally I can do that. But I understand that the prudent way would have got me to the same place. But the thing is, if I choose the prudent way, well, then I don't make any smarter players fold. So probably you're right. At the level where I play, it would have been better to just call. But when I played against better people who know when to fold, then I think going all in would have been better.
Well, the thing is, better players won't even limp into this pot. So that already tells you all you need to know about player one. And then secondly, what did I want to say secondly? Yes, you said that on the bubble, he wouldn't have done it. Actually, I disagree with that. I think on the bubble, he likely would have folded his Jack-8 suited. So I think the reason he called you here was precisely because you're not on the bubble. If this was the bubble, you had more chips than him, all the pressure would be on him. And I'm not sure he would have gambled then.
A very good remark. Thank you, Norman. Do you want to add anything to it? Can I close it? Because that was my last hand.
I think it's good enough for now.
It's awesome, Norman. You were extremely kind, extremely patient, and I really enjoyed our lesson and our talk before that. So thanks for everything. You are a very generous man. I'm looking forward to see you next week, if that's all right with you. And until then, I wish you the best. Now what I will do is, if the weather is not too bad and there's no rain, I think I'll go for a run, because I think it's good for me to move my body a little after sitting so much. What about you?
I don't know. I will probably eat and then play some poker, or at first I have to look at, I think, some messages and emails and stuff like that. So we'll see.
Then enjoy your meal and take care, Norman. Thanks a lot. It
All
was
the
great.
best.
Bye-bye.